Picture this. A village drowning in fire and screams. A demon fox the size of a mountain crushing homes beneath its 9 tails. And in the middle of that apocalypse, a single infant, wrapped in a blanket, crying his lungs out, about to become something no shinobi nation had ever seen before. What if I told you that the boy the world would come to underestimate, mock, and cast aside, was never meant to be ordinary? What if the power sealed inside him that night wasn't just a demon fox, but the entire bloodline of a fallen nation, waiting silently to wake up? Welcome back, everyone. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell, because this story, this what if, is one you don't want to miss a second of. Let's dive in. The night the 9 tails attacked Konohagakure was supposed to end with a simple sacrifice. Minato Namikaze, the 4th Hokage, had prepared everything meticulously. The summoning of the death, the sealing formula passed down through generations of Uzumaki sealing masters, the technique that would split the fox's chakra and lock half of it away inside his newborn son. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. Kushina Uzumaki lay on the cold stone floor of the sealing chamber, her chakra chains, the famous adamantine sealing chains of her clan, flickering weakly around her as she poured the last of her strength into stabilizing the ritual. Blood soaked through the bandages wrapped around her abdomen. She was dying, and she knew it, but in her final moments, as she watched her husband perform the sealing technique on their son, something ancient stirred. The Uzumaki clan had never been ordinary. Long before their nation of Uzushiogakure was destroyed by the combined forces of 3 enemy villages, they had been renowned across the shinobi world for 2 things: their monstrous chakra reserves, and their unparalleled mastery of Fuinjutsu, the sealing arts. It was said that the clan's very blood carried encoded knowledge, dormant traits passed down silently through generations, waiting for the right catalyst to bring them roaring to life. That catalyst, on this night, was death itself. As Minato's sealing technique took hold, drawing half of Kurama's overwhelming chakra into the infant Naruto, the Uzumaki clan seal buried deep within Kushina's bloodline, a seal so old that even she didn't fully understand its purpose, activated in response. It recognized the presence of Kurama's chakra merging with an Uzumaki child, and it responded exactly as it had been designed to centuries ago, by unlocking everything. Every dormant bloodline trait. Every suppressed genetic potential. Every whisper of the clan's forgotten techniques. All of it began pouring into baby Naruto in that single, cataclysmic moment. Kushina gasped, her eyes widening as she felt the shift in the air, a warmth spreading from her chest into her son. She didn't understand it fully, she wouldn't live long enough to, but as her vision began to fade, she managed one final, weak smile. Naruto, she whispered, her voice barely audible over the chaos outside. You're going to carry more than just a burden. You're going to carry, all of us. Minato knelt beside her, tears streaming down his face, torn between grief and the responsibility now resting on his shoulders. He didn't notice the faint shimmer of chakra chains, translucent, golden, and possibly ancient, that flickered briefly around his son's tiny form before dissolving into his skin. He didn't notice the way Naruto's chakra signature, even as an infant, pulsed with something far greater than what a newborn should possess. He only had time to say goodbye. 6 years passed, Konoha rebuilt. Wounds healed, for most, at least. But for one small boy living alone in a modest apartment on the edge of the village, life remained a constant uphill battle. Naruto Uzumaki was 6 years old, and already, he understood what it meant to be alone. The villagers' stares followed him wherever he went, sharp, cold, filled with a resentment he couldn't understand. He didn't know why the shopkeepers overcharged him, why parents pulled their children away when he tried to make friends, why the academy teachers seemed to grade him harsher than everyone else. All he knew was that something about him made people afraid. What he also didn't know, what nobody except a handful of trusted individuals knew, was that his body had already begun exhibiting signs of something extraordinary. It started small. A scraped knee that healed within hours instead of days. A fever that broke almost as quickly as it began. Naruto brushed it off as nothing, the way children often do, more concerned with the ache of loneliness than the mysteries of his own biology. But one autumn evening changed everything. Naruto had wandered to the training grounds near the edge of the forest, as he often did when the walls of his apartment felt too quiet and the streets too hostile. He liked throwing rocks at the practice targets, pretending he was one of the shinobi he idolized from a distance, powerful, respected, someone people looked up to instead of away from. That evening, 3 older boys, academy students a few years ahead of him, found him there. "Look who it is," one of them sneered, his friends flanking him with the casual cruelty children can sometimes wield without understanding its weight. The demon brat, playing ninja. Naruto's hands curled into fists. "I'm not a demon," he muttered, though the words felt small against the boy's confidence. "Everyone knows what you are," the boy pressed, stepping closer. "My dad says you should have died with the 4th Hokage." The words hit harder than Naruto expected. He felt something twist in his chest, not sadness this time, but anger. Hot, sudden anger that seemed to rise from somewhere deep inside him, somewhere he didn't know existed. The boy shoved him. Naruto stumbled back, and in that moment of fear and fury tangled together, something inside him cracked open. A chain, golden, glowing faintly, impossibly solid, burst from his forearm. It moved on its own, whip-fast, wrapping around the older boy's ankle and yanking him off his feet before Naruto even understood what was happening. The boy screamed, more from shock than pain, as the chain retracted just as suddenly as it had appeared, vanishing back into Naruto's skin like it had never been there at all. Silence fell over the training ground. The 3 boys stared at Naruto with wide, terrified eyes. Then they ran, sprinting back toward the village, screaming about monsters and demons and chains that came alive. Naruto stood frozen, staring at his own arm in disbelief. His heart pounded so hard he could hear it in his ears. What was that? What had he just done? He didn't have time to process it before he heard footsteps approaching from behind. Quick, deliberate, shinobi-trained footsteps. He turned to find 4 masked figures standing at the edge of the clearing. Umbu. Word had reached Hiruzen Sarutobi, the 3rd Hokage, within minutes. A report from panicked children about chains and monsters would normally be dismissed as childish exaggeration, but not when it involved Naruto Uzumaki. Hiruzen sat in his office, the weight of decades of leadership etched into every line on his aging face, listening intently as the ANBU captain recounted what witnesses had described. Golden chains, emerging from the boy's arm, retracting on their own. The old Hokage's expression grew troubled, not with fear, but with recognition. He rose slowly from his desk and made his way to a sealed archive deep beneath the Hokage building, a place few in the village even knew existed. It housed remnants of Konoha's oldest alliances, including scrolls and records salvaged decades ago from the ruins of Uzushiogakure, the Uzumaki clan's ancestral homeland, destroyed in the shinobi world wars before Naruto was even born. Among those records was a name Hiruzen hadn't thought about in years: Mito Uzumaki, the first Hokage's wife, and the very first Jinchuriki of the 9 Tails. Her personal writings on Fuinjutsu and her own clan's bloodline had been sealed away, considered too advanced, or too dangerous, for common study. Hiruzen unrolled one particular scroll, his eyes scanning faded ink describing something called the Uzushio Awakening Seal, a dormant clause embedded within certain branches of the Uzumaki bloodline. According to Mito's notes, under specific and extreme circumstances, the merging of overwhelming external chakra with an Uzumaki host, particularly during a sealing ritual involving death, this dormant seal could activate, unlocking latent clan traits that had otherwise remained dormant for generations. Chains. Enhanced healing. Monstrous reserves. Sensory perception far beyond normal human capability. Hiruzen's breath caught in his throat. Minato. He murmured to himself. You didn't just seal Kurama into him. You woke up everything else too. He sat there for a long moment, the scroll trembling slightly in his weathered hands, as the full weight of the situation settled over him. Naruto Uzumaki wasn't simply a Jinchuriki carrying a terrible burden. He was, quite possibly, the last true heir to an entire nation's worth of bloodline power, a power that had died with Uzushiogakure, resurrected now in a 6-year-old boy who didn't even know what he was. And if the villagers were already treating him with fear and hatred over merely being a Jinchuriki, Hiruzen dreaded to imagine their reaction if they learned the full truth. He made a decision, right then and there, sitting alone in that dim archive room. Whatever was awakening inside Naruto, it needed to be understood and protected before anyone else could exploit it. The Hokage's office was quiet, save for the soft ticking of a clock on the wall, when Naruto was brought in later that evening, flanked by 2 ANBU guards. The boy looked exhausted, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and confusion, clutching his own forearm as though checking it were still human. "Naruto," Hiruzen said gently, his voice carrying the warmth he always tried to extend to the boy, even when the rest of the village refused to. "Are you hurt?" Naruto shook his head quickly. "And no, old man Hokage. I don't know what happened. Something came out of my arm and I didn't mean to. I swear I didn't mean to hurt anyone, I just got scared and—" "It's all right," Hiruzen interrupted softly, raising a hand to calm the boy's rapid-fire explanation. "You're not in trouble." Naruto blinked, clearly not expecting that response. "I'm not? No." Hiruzen gestured for the boy to sit in the chair across from his desk, and Naruto climbed up hesitantly, still looking as though he expected to be scolded any moment. "Naruto, do you know much about your mother?" The question caught the boy off guard. He shook his head slowly. "Nobody ever told me anything about my parents." Hiruzen nodded, unsurprised. It was a deliberate secret, one meant to protect Naruto from enemies who might seek to harm Minato's son. But perhaps, the old Hokage thought, it was time the boy learned at least part of the truth, enough to help him understand what was happening to his own body. "Your mother's name was Kushina," Hiruzen said carefully. "She came from a very special clan called the Uzumaki. They were known throughout the shinobi world for incredible abilities. Chakra reserves larger than almost anyone else's, techniques passed down through generations that no other clan could replicate." Naruto leaned forward slightly, his earlier fear giving way to curiosity. "Like what kind of techniques?" "Sealing techniques, for one," Hiruzen explained. "Your mother's clan were masters of something called Fuinjutsu, the art of sealing. It's an incredibly advanced and rare skill, even among skilled shinobi." He paused, choosing his next words carefully. "And some members of your mother's clan possessed a unique ability, chains made of pure chakra, strong enough to bind even powerful enemies." Naruto's eyes widened. "Like what happened today?" "Exactly like what happened today," Hiruzen confirmed. "What you did wasn't something to be afraid of, Naruto. It's part of who you are, part of your mother's legacy." For a moment, Naruto said nothing, simply staring down at his own hands as though seeing them for the first time. Then, quietly, he asked, "Why didn't anyone tell me before?" Hiruzen's expression softened with something like regret. "There are many things about your past I wish I could have shared with you sooner, but there are people in this world who might try to hurt you if they knew the full truth about what you carry. I've kept certain things hidden to protect you." "Protect me from what?" The Hokage hesitated. This was the delicate line he had to walk, offering enough truth to help the boy without burdening him with the full weight of his Jinchuriki status before he was ready. "From people who might see you only as a weapon, rather than a person," Hiruzen said finally. "But I think it's time you started learning about what you're capable of, properly, safely, with guidance. Would you like that?" Naruto's face lit up with an expression Hiruzen hadn't seen from the boy in a long time, genuine, unguarded excitement. "You mean, someone would actually teach me stuff? Like special ninja stuff?" "Yes," Hiruzen said, allowing himself a small smile. "I'll arrange for you to begin training, chakra control, basic principles of Fuinjutsu, and how to safely manage abilities like the chains you displayed today. It won't be easy, Naruto. But I believe you have great potential, greater than perhaps even I fully understand yet." Naruto practically vibrated with enthusiasm in his seat. "I won't let you down, old man Hokage. I'll train harder than anyone, believe it." Hiruzen chuckled softly at the boy's characteristic energy, though beneath his warm exterior, his mind churned with concern. If Mito's notes were accurate, chains and healing were likely only the beginning of what Naruto's bloodline held in store. Sensory abilities, chakra reserves beyond normal human limits, an intuitive grasp of Fuinjutsu that could rival trained adults. All of it, potentially, waiting to surface as the boy grew. The old Hokage understood, in that moment, that he was no longer simply protecting a Jinchuriki. He was safeguarding the last living vessel of an entire nation's inheritance. Over the following weeks, Hiruzen quietly arranged for Naruto's education to begin, not through the standard academy curriculum, but through private sessions held early in the mornings before his regular classes, away from prying eyes. The Hokage himself couldn't dedicate every session given his duties, but he made time where he could, teaching Naruto the fundamentals of chakra control through simple exercises, leaf-sticking practice, careful breathing techniques, and small doses of meditation meant to help the boy learn to sense and regulate the immense chakra now stirring within him. Naruto struggled at first, his naturally hyperactive personality clashing with the patience required for chakra control. But Hiruzen noted, with quiet astonishment, that the boy's chakra reserves, even at 6 years old, already dwarfed those of most fully trained chunin. It was as though his body were a vessel built for something far greater than a normal shinobi's capacity, and it would take significant effort simply to help him manage it without losing control. During one such early morning session, as autumn gave way to the first chill of winter, Naruto sat cross-legged on the training ground grass, eyes closed, brow furrowed in concentration as he attempted to draw a small, controlled thread of chakra to his palm, an exercise Hiruzen hoped would help him understand the sensation of manipulating chakra deliberately, rather than through uncontrolled bursts of chains. Focus on the feeling, Hiruzen instructed gently, watching the boy's small hands tremble slightly with effort. Don't force it. Let it come naturally, like breathing. Naruto's face scrunched with determination, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool morning air. Slowly, hesitantly, a faint blue glow began to form at his palm, not the golden chains from before, but a controlled wisp of chakra, steady and small. I did it! Naruto's eyes shot open, grinning ear to ear as he stared at the small glow in his hand. Old man Hokage, look, I did it! Hiruzen allowed himself a proud smile. Well done, Naruto. That's an excellent start. The boy's chakra flickered out moments later, but his enthusiasm remained undimmed. Can I learn the chains next? The really cool ones? Patience, Hiruzen chuckled. The chains require far more control than what you've just learned. We'll build up to it, step by step. As the weeks turned into months, Naruto's training continued in secret, his progress steady if unspectacular by shinobi standards, until, one bitterly cold morning in early winter, something changed. It happened during a routine chakra sensing exercise. Hiruzen had been teaching Naruto the basics of detecting nearby chakra signatures, a skill typically introduced much later in a shinobi's training, but one the Hokage suspected might come more naturally to Naruto given his clan's history. Close your eyes, Hiruzen instructed, standing several meters away in the training field. Try to feel for my chakra. Don't look for it with your eyes, feel it, the way you'd feel warmth from a fire. Naruto scrunched his eyes shut, brow furrowing in concentration. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, gradually, his expression shifted from effort to surprise. I think I feel you, he said slowly, pointing in Hiruzen's exact direction without opening his eyes. But it's weird, I feel other stuff too. Like, there's someone by the tree line, and someone else, way over there, past the river. Hiruzen's eyebrows rose sharply. He hadn't sensed anyone stationed near the river. The nearest chakra signature aside from his own should have been the two A and B guards discreetly watching over the session from the tree line, a good distance away, their presence masked with considerable skill. Naruto, Hiruzen said carefully, how far away do you think that second signature is? Naruto tilted his head, still concentrating. I dunno, pretty far? Like past the training grounds, maybe near the river bridge? Hiruzen's pulse quickened. The distance Naruto was describing was nearly a full kilometer away, an almost unheard-of range for sensory detection, especially from an untrained 6-year-old. Only a handful of the most skilled sensor-type shinobi in the entire village could reliably detect chakra signatures at that distance, and even then, typically only with intense focus and years of dedicated training. That's very impressive, Naruto, Hiruzen said, carefully keeping his voice steady despite his internal shock. Can you tell me anything else about that signature? Does it feel familiar or unfamiliar? Naruto's face scrunched in concentration again. It feels kinda sneaky? Like it's trying to hide, but I can still feel it a little. Hiruzen made a mental note to have that area quietly investigated. If Naruto's sensory range was genuinely as vast as it appeared, it wasn't just a useful skill, it was a strategic asset that needed careful, controlled development, and possibly protection from anyone who might wish to exploit it. As the training session concluded and Naruto ran off to prepare for his regular academy classes, practically skipping with pride over his newfound sensory discovery, Hiruzen remained standing in the quiet training field, lost in thought. Chains. Enhanced healing. Now sensory perception far beyond normal limits. Each new revelation only reinforced what Mito's ancient notes had warned. Naruto Uzumaki's bloodline awakening was not a singular event, but an ongoing unfolding, one that showed no signs of slowing down. The question weighing on Hiruzen's mind was no longer whether Naruto would grow into an extraordinarily powerful shinobi. It was whether the village, and the wider shinobi world, was prepared for what that power might eventually become. Unbeknownst to Hiruzen, his careful secrecy surrounding Naruto's private training sessions hadn't gone entirely unnoticed. In a dimly lit underground chamber beneath Konoha, a figure sat alone at a low wooden desk, a single candle providing the only light against the darkness. Danzo Shimura's remaining eye studied a report laid out before him, brief notes gathered by a rude operative who had, quite by chance, observed one of Naruto's early morning training sessions from a distance before being noticed and quietly withdrawn. Chakra chains. Sensory range exceeding a kilometer at 6 years old. Chakra reserves already comparable to a trained chunin. Danzo's single visible eye narrowed thoughtfully as he read the report a second time. He had, of course, always known Naruto Uzumaki carried the Nine Tails. That much had never been a secret to him, even if it remained hidden from the general populace. But this was new information. If the boy truly carried the full bloodline inheritance of the Uzumaki clan, awakened through whatever unusual circumstances surrounded the sealing ritual, then Naruto represented something far more significant than a simple Jinchuriki. He represented potential. Raw, untapped, extraordinary potential, the kind Danzo had spent his entire life seeking to harness in service of what he believed was necessary for Konoha's strength and survival. Danzo set the report down slowly, his mind already turning over possibilities. Hiruzen, predictably, would want to protect the boy, to nurture him gently, to let him grow at his own pace under careful guidance. Admirable, perhaps, but in Danzo's estimation, dangerously inefficient given the stakes at play in an increasingly unstable shinobi world. If Naruto's power was destined to grow as extraordinarily as this report suggested, then the question wasn't whether the boy would eventually become a critical asset to Konoha's strength. It was who would ultimately guide that growth, and toward what purpose. Interesting, Danzo murmured to himself, extinguishing the candle with a slow breath. Very interesting indeed. Back in his modest apartment that evening, unaware of the shadowy attention his training had already attracted, Naruto sat cross-legged on his bed, staring intently at his own palm, willing a faint blue glow of chakra to form there as Hiruzen had taught him. It flickered weakly into existence, and Naruto grinned with quiet satisfaction. For the first time in his young life, he felt something other than loneliness and rejection settling into the empty spaces of his heart. He felt purpose. He felt the first stirrings of belonging, not to the village that had shunned him, but to a legacy he was only just beginning to understand. A mother he never knew, a clan he never met, and abilities that marked him as something far more than the outcast the villagers saw when they looked at him with fear and disdain. He didn't know yet about Uzushiogakure, the once great shinobi nation his mother's clan had called home, destroyed decades before his birth in a devastating war that scattered its surviving members across the world. He didn't know about the adamantine sealing chain's true history, or the legendary sealing techniques his ancestors had pioneered, techniques so advanced that even other great nations had once feared and respected the Uzumaki name. He didn't yet understand that what stirred within him wasn't simply a random collection of unusual abilities, but the deliberate, ancient inheritance of an entire fallen nation, waiting, patiently, for the right moment to fully awaken. But he would learn. Chapter by chapter, lesson by lesson, his understanding of his own extraordinary nature would deepen, and the world, the village that dismissed him, the shinobi nations that had long forgotten Uzushiogakures' name, even the shadowy figures already beginning to take quiet interest in his potential, none of them yet grasped what Naruto Uzumaki was truly becoming. The chains had only just begun to stir. 3 weeks after Naruto's first sensory breakthrough, Hiruzen Sarutobi found himself standing in a quiet, rarely used wing of the Hokage's residence. waiting for a guest whose arrival he had arranged with considerable discretion. The man he was expecting wasn't a shinobi of Konoha, nor a citizen of the Land of Fire at all. He was something far rarer, one of the last surviving sealing masters of Uzushiogakure, a nation that had ceased to exist decades ago. His name was Torian Kazama, no relation to the root operative of similar circumstance elsewhere in the village, simply a man who had carried that name since birth, back when Uzushiogakure still stood proud along the coastline of the Land of Whirlpools. He was elderly now, well into his 70s, with silver hair pulled back into a simple knot, and weathered hands that had spent a lifetime working with ink paper and chakra in ways few remaining shinobi could comprehend. Torian had survived the destruction of his homeland as a young man, one of only a handful of Uzumaki-trained sealing practitioners who managed to escape before the combined forces of 3 enemy nations razed Uzushiogakure to the ground. He had spent the following decades quietly, deliberately avoiding entanglement with any of the great shinobi nations, wary of the same fate befalling him that had befallen his people. He earned his keep as a traveling scroll restorer, drifting from village to village, never settling, never revealing the full extent of what he knew. Hiruzen had tracked him down through old contacts and a considerable amount of patience, eventually convincing him, through careful, respectful correspondence, to make the journey to Konoha for a matter of, as Hiruzen's letter had put it, grave importance to the last living heir of Uzushiogakures bloodline. That phrase alone had been enough to bring Torian out of decades of self-imposed obscurity. "You're certain," Torian said now, seated across from Hiruzen in a private meeting room, his voice carrying the particular gravity of someone who had spent a lifetime being careful with his words, "that the boy's abilities manifested spontaneously? Not through any deliberate training?" "Completely spontaneous," Hiruzen confirmed. "Chains, accelerated healing, and now sensory range that, by my estimation, already exceeds a kilometer. All of this from a child not yet 7 years old." Torian's weathered face remained carefully neutral, though his eyes, sharp despite his age, flickered with something like recognition. "There were old stories among my people," he said slowly, "of certain bloodlines within the greater Uzumaki clan possessing what we called the Awakening inheritance. It was said to activate under extreme circumstances, grief, near-death, or powerful external chakra merging with the bloodline. Most in my generation considered it myth. A story parents told children to explain why some Uzumaki grew stronger, faster, more capable than others without clear cause. I found reference to it in Mito Uzumaki's own writings," Hiruzen said, sliding a worn scroll across the table. "She called it the Uzushio Awakening Seal." Torian's eyebrows rose slightly as he unrolled the scroll, his eyes scanning the faded ink with evident familiarity. "Lady Mito," he murmured, something wistful entering his tone. "Even in my time, her name was spoken with reverence. If she documented this phenomenon directly, then it's far more than myth." He looked up, meeting Hiruzen's gaze steadily. "If what you're describing is accurate, Hokage-sama, then this boy isn't simply gifted. He may be the fullest expression of our clan's inheritance seen in generations, perhaps ever. Which is precisely why I need your help," Hiruzen said. "No one currently living in Konoha possesses the knowledge to train him properly. I need someone who understands Uzushiogakures techniques, not just the chains, but the sealing arts, the chakra control methods your people developed over generations. Someone who can guide him safely, before his own power becomes something he can't control." Torian was quiet for a long moment, his gaze drifting to the window, where the afternoon sun cast long shadows over Konoha's rooftops. He thought of his homeland, reduced to rubble decades ago. He thought of the friends and family he'd lost, the techniques and traditions he'd carried alone for so long, with no one to pass them on to. "I retired from this life a long time ago," he said finally. "I told myself I wanted nothing more to do with the shinobi world's politics and dangers." He turned back to Hiruzen, something resolute settling into his expression. "But if what remains of my people's legacy is truly alive in this boy, I cannot, in good conscience, let it go untaught. I'll train him." Hiruzen allowed himself a small, relieved smile. "Thank you, Torian-san. I promise you, this will be handled with the utmost discretion." "See that it is," Torian said, his tone carrying a quiet warning. "Because if the wrong people learn what this child carries before he's capable of protecting himself, The consequences will be far worse than anything that happened to Uzushiogakure. Naruto met Torian Kazama for the first time on a crisp winter morning, in the same secluded training ground where his sensory abilities had first surfaced weeks earlier. The old man stood waiting patiently as Hiruzen led the boy over, Naruto's expression a mixture of curiosity and characteristic energy despite the early hour. Naruto, Hiruzen said, this is Torian-san. He's going to be teaching you many of the things I mentioned before, special techniques from your mother's clan. Naruto's eyes lit up immediately, all traces of morning grogginess vanishing. Really? You're gonna teach me the chain stuff? Torian studied the boy for a long moment, his sharp eyes taking in details Naruto himself wasn't even aware of. The subtle way chakra seemed to hum just beneath his skin, restless and vast, like a great river contained behind an insufficient dam. It was, Torian thought privately, both remarkable and slightly unsettling. In time, Torian said, his voice measured and calm. But first, you must understand something important, young one. The techniques of our clan were never simply about power. They were about discipline, patience, and respect for the tremendous responsibility such power demands. Do you understand? Naruto nodded quickly, though Torian could tell the boy's understanding was more enthusiasm than genuine comprehension, an issue time and proper teaching would need to address. Good, Torian said. Then let us begin with the fundamentals of Fuinjutsu, the sealing arts that made our clan renowned across the shinobi world. The lessons that followed over the coming weeks were unlike anything the Academy's standard curriculum offered. Torian began not with flashy techniques, but with the theoretical foundations of chakra manipulation as it pertains specifically to sealing, the way chakra could be woven into physical mediums like paper and ink, given shape and purpose through precise calligraphy and mathematical formulas that dated back centuries. To Hiruzen's quiet astonishment, and Torian's carefully concealed amazement, Naruto took to the theoretical concepts with startling speed. Where most students, even talented ones, struggled for months to grasp the basic principles of seal construction, Naruto seemed to intuitively understand the underlying logic within days. Again, Torian instructed one afternoon, watching as Naruto carefully brushed ink strokes onto a practice scroll, attempting to replicate a basic storage seal Torian had demonstrated only once. Focus on the flow between each character. A seal is not simply drawn, it is a conversation between the chakra and the medium. Naruto's tongue poked out slightly in concentration, his small hand moving with more precision than a child his age should possess. When he finished, he held the scroll out proudly. Torian examined it carefully, his weathered fingers tracing the ink lines, testing the chakra flow with a practiced touch. His eyebrows rose slightly. This is remarkably close to correct, he said, genuine surprise coloring his usually composed tone. There's a minor imbalance here. He pointed to a specific junction in the seal, which would cause instability if activated. But for a first attempt, after only 3 demonstrations, this is exceptional work. Naruto beamed with pride. Told you I'd learn fast. Confidence is good, Torian said, though a small smile tugged at the corner of his mouth despite his best efforts to remain stern. But do not let it become arrogance. Even the most skilled sealing masters spent years perfecting their craft. You have shown promise, not mastery. Remember that distinction. Naruto nodded, though his grin remained undimmed. As the weeks passed, Torian began introducing more advanced concepts, the history of Uzushiogakure itself, the significance of the whirlpool symbol still worn by shinobi allied with the old nation, and stories of legendary Uzumaki sealing masters whose techniques had once made entire villages hesitant to provoke conflict with the land of whirlpools. Your clan, Torian explained one evening, as autumn's chill deepened into winter's full bite, was so feared for their sealing abilities that other nations conspired together simply to see Uzushiogakure destroyed, fearing what might happen if such power was allowed to flourish unchecked. That is the weight of the legacy you carry, Naruto. Never take it lightly. Naruto listened with rapt attention, something shifting behind his blue eyes, not quite understanding fully, but beginning, slowly, to grasp the significance of what he represented. Did you know my mom? He asked quietly, during one such lesson. Torian's expression softened, memories flickering behind his gaze. I did not know her personally. She left our homeland when she was very young, sent to Konoha before I came of age. But I knew of her family, and I heard stories of her strength even from a distance. She carried the will of our people with her, wherever she went. It seems, he added, glancing at Naruto with something like quiet respect, that will has passed to you as well. Naruto said nothing for a long moment, simply staring down at his ink-stained hands. Then, quietly, he said, I want to make her proud. And you too. An old man Hokage. Torian placed a weathered hand gently on the boy's shoulder. Then continue as you have been. That is all any of us could ask. Alongside his Fuinjutsu training, Naruto's other abilities continued to develop under Torian's careful guidance. His sensory range expanded steadily with practice, and Torian introduced exercises designed to help him differentiate between chakra signatures, recognizing not just presence, but intent, emotional state, and rough estimates of skill level based on subtle variations in chakra texture. Close your eyes, Torian instructed one crisp morning, standing several dozen meters away in the training field, joined for this particular exercise by 2 A and B guards positioned at varying distances. Tell me not just where each presence is, but what you sense from them. Naruto concentrated, brow furrowed in the familiar expression of effort Torian had come to recognize. You feel calm. Steady, like a lake with no waves, he said slowly. The guy on the left, he feels sharp, like he's ready to move fast if he needs to. And the one on the right feels, kinda tired? Like he didn't sleep good. Torian's eyebrows rose slightly, glancing toward the A and B guard on the right, who shifted uncomfortably beneath his mask. Apparently the boy's assessment had struck uncomfortably close to truth. Remarkable, Torian murmured, more to himself than to Naruto. Sensory discernment at this level of detail was a skill typically requiring years of dedicated training, and here was a 7-year-old child demonstrating it with only weeks of practice. The chains, too, began receiving careful, deliberate attention. Torian understood the danger inherent in leaving such a technique to develop uncontrolled, as it had during Naruto's earlier outburst against the older academy students. Uncontrolled chains could just as easily harm their user as an intended target, and Torian had no intention of allowing history's mistakes. Stories he'd heard of Uzumaki practitioners injured by their own chakra chains during moments of poor control, to repeat themselves with Naruto. The chains respond to emotional intensity, Torian explained during one training session, as Naruto stood nervously in the center of the training ground, having been asked to deliberately summon the chains for the first time under controlled supervision. Fear, anger, desperation to protect. These are the triggers that awaken them within you initially, but true mastery means learning to call upon them deliberately, through will rather than emotional extremity. How do I do that? Naruto asked, flexing his fingers nervously. Focus on the sensation you felt during their first appearance, Torian instructed. Not the fear itself, but the underlying desire, the need to protect yourself, to assert your will. Channel that intention deliberately, without needing the emotional intensity to trigger it. Naruto closed his eyes, concentrating hard, his small face scrunched with effort. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, a faint golden shimmer began to form around his forearm, not the explosive burst from before, but something more controlled, more deliberate. A single chain, no longer than a meter, extended slowly from his skin, hovering in the air before him like a serpent awaiting command. Naruto's eyes shot open, staring at the chain in amazement. I did it. I actually did it. Excellent, Torian said, genuine approval evident in his voice. Now, without losing focus, try to direct its movement. Picture it as an extension of your own arm. Naruto concentrated, and the chain shifted slightly, curling and extending with hesitant, jerky movements, clearly still far from graceful control, but undeniably progress. Over the following weeks, Naruto's control over the chains improved steadily, moving from single tentative extensions to eventually summoning multiple chains simultaneously, capable of binding targets with increasing precision rather than simply lashing out uncontrolled. Torian noted, with a mixture of pride and quiet concern, that Naruto's chakra reserves showed no signs of strain even after extensive training sessions that would have exhausted most fully trained Chunin. His reserves are unprecedented, Torian admitted to Hiruzen during one of their private updates, the two men standing in the Hokage's office as evening settled over the village. Even accounting for the Ninetales chakra contribution, his own natural reserves already exceed what I would expect from a fully trained Jonin. If this growth continues unchecked as he ages, He could become dangerously powerful, even by shinobi standards. Hiruzen finished the thought, his expression grave. Or, Torian countered, he could become exactly what the world needs, someone with the strength to protect, guided by wisdom and discipline rather than fear or ambition. The path he takes depends entirely on how he is raised, and who influences him along the way. Hiruzen nodded slowly, the weight of that responsibility settling heavily on his shoulders. Which is precisely why I intend to remain closely involved in his upbringing, regardless of the demands of my office. Naruto's transformation, though carefully concealed from the wider village, did not go entirely unnoticed by those closest to him in his everyday life. His academy instructor, Iruka Umino, though not yet the close mentor figure he would eventually become, began noticing subtle changes in the boy's demeanor and capabilities during standard classes. When Naruto had previously struggled with basic chakra control exercises, he now demonstrated a level of precision that, while still imperfect, showed marked improvement compared to just months earlier. His physical stamina during training exercises also seemed to have increased noticeably, allowing him to complete drills that left his classmates winded without showing significant fatigue. Something's different about him, Iruka mentioned to a fellow instructor during a break between classes, watching through the window as Naruto completed a series of laps around the academy's outdoor track with less exhaustion than seemed physically reasonable. I don't know what's changed, but he's improving faster than I've seen from any student in years. His fellow instructor, a stern woman named Mizuki, though Iruka did not yet know the true extent of Mizuki's hidden allegiances or ambitions, offered only a dismissive shrug. Probably just a growth spurt. Don't read too much into it. But Iruka couldn't shake the feeling that something more significant was happening beneath the surface, even if he lacked the full context to understand exactly what. Naruto's classmates, too, began noticing the shift, though their reactions remained largely rooted in the same casual dismissal or wary distance that had characterized their treatment of him previously. A few, however, particularly a quiet, unassuming girl named Hinata Hyuga, whose own sharp eyes and natural perceptiveness often went unnoticed by her classmates, watched Naruto's gradual transformation with quiet, growing curiosity. Hinata had always harbored a soft admiration for Naruto's persistent, unyielding spirit, even when the rest of the class treated him with casual cruelty or indifference. But now, she noticed something more, a subtle confidence beginning to settle into his posture, a steadiness in his gaze that hadn't been present before. She didn't understand the reasons behind the change, but she found herself, quietly and without quite realizing it, paying closer attention to the boy others so easily overlooked. As winter deepened into its coldest months, Torian introduced Naruto to a new dimension of his training, one intended to test not just his growing sealing knowledge and sensory perception, but the resilience of his rapidly developing healing factor. This exercise, Torian explained carefully, as he and Naruto stood in a private section of the training grounds, will help us understand the true extent of your body's regenerative capabilities. It is important we know your limits, so that in genuine combat situations, you understand exactly what your body can endure. The exercise, conducted with the utmost caution and Hiruzen's explicit oversight, involved a series of carefully controlled, minor injuries, small cuts, closely monitored, administered under strict medical supervision to observe the rate and efficiency of Naruto's healing response. The results left even Torian, a man who had spent decades studying his clan's unique physiological traits, quietly stunned. A shallow cut that would typically require several days to fully heal in an average child closed within mere hours for Naruto, the skin knitting back together with minimal scarring. Deeper test wounds, conducted only under the careful supervision of a trusted medical nin sworn to secrecy, showed similarly accelerated healing rates, far exceeding even the most optimistic projections based on typical Uzumaki clan traits recorded in historical texts. This is beyond anything documented even among the strongest Uzumaki bloodlines I studied in my youth, Torian admitted, reviewing the medical nin's careful notes afterward. His body seems capable of accelerated cellular regeneration at a rate that could prove tremendously valuable in combat situations, allowing him to endure injuries that would incapacitate other shinobi. A double-edged advantage, however, the attending medical nin cautioned. Such rapid healing could potentially mask serious injuries the boy might otherwise be more careful to avoid, given his body's ability to recover so quickly. Discipline regarding pain tolerance and injury awareness will be crucial as he grows. Hiruzen nodded gravely, filing away the observation. Understood. We'll need to ensure his training includes proper caution alongside confidence in his resilience. Naruto, for his part, remained blissfully unaware of the full clinical significance of these tests, simply proud that he'd proven capable of healing crazy fast, as he excitedly described it afterward, already imagining the possibilities this might afford him in future training and, eventually, real missions. It was during one of these final winter training sessions that Danzo Shimura's quiet observation of Naruto's development took its first concrete step toward direct action. In his private underground chamber, Danzo reviewed the latest report from his root operatives, more detailed now, having managed to observe several of Naruto's training sessions from carefully concealed vantage points before risking detection by the boy's rapidly improving sensory range. Fuinjutsu aptitude exceeding expectations for a child his age. Sensory range now approaching 2 kilometers under controlled conditions. Accelerated healing confirmed through direct medical testing. Chakra reserves continuing to expand at an unprecedented rate. Danzo's single visible eye studied the report with calculating intensity. The boy's potential, it seemed, only continued to grow more remarkable with each passing month. He understood, of course, the delicate balance required in approaching this situation. Hiruzen had clearly taken personal, protective interest in the boy's development, arranging private training through channels that, while not entirely hidden from Danzo's extensive intelligence network, remained deliberately obscured from wider village knowledge. Moving too aggressively to insert himself into Naruto's upbringing risked direct confrontation with the Hokage, a confrontation Danzo, for now, preferred to avoid given the delicate political balance currently maintained within the village's leadership. But patience, Danzo reminded himself, was a virtue he had cultivated across decades of careful political maneuvering. The boy was still young, his loyalties and worldview still being shaped. There would be opportunities, in time, to subtly influence that development, perhaps through carefully placed individuals within his eventual shinobi team, or through manufactured circumstances that might naturally draw the boy toward Root's particular philosophy regarding strength, discipline, and Konoha's true interests. Continue monitoring, Danzo instructed the Root operative delivering the report, his tone carrying its usual measured coldness. But maintain absolute discretion. The Hokage must not suspect the extent of our interests, not yet. The operative bowed silently and withdrew, leaving Danzo alone once more with his thoughts and the flickering candlelight. Uzushiogakures inheritance, reborn in Konoha, Danzo murmured to himself, a rare, calculating smile briefly touching his otherwise stoic features. Such power, properly directed, could reshape the very balance of the shinobi world. The question, as always for a man like Danzo, was not whether such power should be harnessed. It was simply a matter of ensuring it was harnessed correctly, and by the right hands. As winter finally began to loosen its grip and the first signs of spring approached, Naruto stood once more in the familiar training ground, now considerably more confident in his growing abilities than the frightened, confused boy who had first summoned uncontrolled chains months earlier. Torian watched with quiet, paternal pride as Naruto successfully completed a complex sealing exercise, crafting a basic storage seal capable of holding several kilograms of material, a task that would typically challenge even experienced genin, let alone a child not yet 7 years old. You've made remarkable progress, Naruto, Torian said, genuine warmth entering his usually measured tone. Far beyond what I initially anticipated when Hiruzen-sama first approached me. Naruto beamed with pride, though something more thoughtful lingered behind his expression as well, a quiet maturity beginning to take root alongside his characteristic enthusiasm. It's 'cause I got you teaching me the right way, he said. And 'cause I wanna make everyone proud. My mom, old man Hokage, you too. Torian placed a gentle hand on the boy's shoulder, an unusually affectionate gesture from the typically reserved old master. You already have, young one. More than you likely realize. As the training session concluded and Naruto ran off toward the academy, his energy undimmed despite months of intensive additional training layered atop his standard studies, Torian remained behind for a moment, his gaze drifting toward the horizon, thoughts turning toward Uzushiogakures' long-lost legacy. Perhaps, he allowed himself to consider for the first time in decades, his people's inheritance wasn't entirely lost after all. Perhaps, through this remarkable boy, something of Uzushiogakures' spirit, its strength, its wisdom, its unyielding resilience, might yet find its way back into the world. But even as that hopeful thought took root, Torian couldn't entirely shake a quieter, more cautious concern lingering at the edges of his mind. Power such as Naruto possessed, growing at such an unprecedented rate, would inevitably draw attention, not just from those wishing to protect and nurture it, but from those seeking to exploit or eliminate it as a potential threat. Uzushiogakures' downfall, after all, had come not from weakness, but precisely because its strength had grown too great for other nations to comfortably ignore. Torian could only hope that history, this time, would not repeat itself. 6 years is a long time to keep a secret. By the time Naruto Uzumaki stood in the academy courtyard on graduation day, headband tied proudly around his forehead, he was no longer the frightened, uncontrolled child who had once accidentally summoned chains against a group of bullies. He was 12 years old now, and beneath the same orange jumpsuit, an easy grin the village had come to expect from him, he carried abilities that would have made even seasoned jonin pause in disbelief, had they known the full truth. Torian's training had continued in secret throughout those years, evolving alongside Naruto's academy education. His Fuinjutsu had progressed from simple storage seals to intermediate barrier techniques and chakra suppression formulas that most sealing specialists wouldn't attempt until well into adulthood. His sensory range now extended well past 3 kilometers under focused conditions, allowing him to map the general position and rough strength of every chakra signature within a significant portion of the village. His chakra chains, once wild and uncontrolled, now responded with practiced precision, capable of binding, redirecting, or even forming rudimentary defensive barriers when needed. And his healing factor, tested carefully and repeatedly under controlled medical supervision, had only grown more remarkable with time, allowing him to recover from injuries that would sideline ordinary shinobi for weeks in a fraction of the time. Yet to the rest of the village, Naruto remained largely unchanged, loud, boisterous, prone to pranks, and still viewed with the same undercurrent of wary suspicion that had followed him since infancy. Hiruzen and Torian had deliberately encouraged Naruto to mask the true extent of his abilities during academy assessments, wary of drawing unwanted attention before he was old enough, and skilled enough, to protect himself from those who might seek to exploit his potential. It was a careful balancing act, one that weighed heavily on Naruto at times. He wanted, more than almost anything, to be recognized, to prove himself to a village that had spent years looking past him or through him. But he also understood, through Torian's patient guidance, the necessity of restraint. Strength revealed too early, to the wrong eyes, becomes a target rather than a shield, Torian had told him more than once. Patience will serve you far better than premature recognition. So Naruto passed his academy exams with solid, respectable marks, good enough to graduate, but carefully calibrated to avoid outright suspicion regarding the true depth of his abilities. He performed the standard clone jutsu with deliberate imperfection during his final exam, producing a slightly pale, sickly clone rather than the flawless replication he was fully capable of. A small, calculated compromise. Irika Yumino, now his primary academy instructor and a man who had grown to genuinely care for the boy's well-being, allowed to pass given Naruto's otherwise strong performance across other categories. "You've come a long way, Naruto," Irika told him warmly after the exam concluded, fastening a headband around the boy's forehead with visible pride. "I mean that," Naruto grinned, an expression that held more layers now than the desperate, attention-seeking smile of his younger years. "Thanks, Irika-sensei. I'm gonna make you proud." "Believe it," Irika chuckled, ruffling the boy's hair affectionately. "I already am." Team assignments were announced the following morning, and Naruto found himself placed alongside Sasuke Uchiha and Sakura Haruno, under the instruction of the famous copy ninja, Kakashi Hatake. The same team composition history had always intended, though the dynamics awaiting this particular iteration of Team 7 would prove considerably different from what anyone, save Hiruzen and Torian, might have expected. Sasuke Uchiha, the last surviving member of his clan following the tragic massacre that had claimed his family years earlier, carried himself with the same cold, driven intensity that had defined him throughout his academy years, singularly focused on growing stronger, on avenging his family by any means necessary. He had graduated at the top of their class, his considerable natural talent and rigorous self-driven training earning him a reputation as a prodigy among his peers. Sakura Haruno, meanwhile, carried herself with sharp intelligence and considerable chakra control precision, though years of misplaced priorities, chasing Sasuke's attention rather than fully investing in her own shinobi development, had left her practical combat skills somewhat underdeveloped compared to her more academically inclined strengths. And then there was Naruto, the quiet dark horse whose true capabilities remained hidden beneath a carefully maintained facade of mediocre to decent competence, at least in the eyes of everyone except the two men who had spent years nurturing his growth in secret. Kakashi Hatake arrived to their first meeting characteristically late, offering the team a lazy, one-eyed greeting before subjecting them to the introductory bell test that had become something of a rite of passage for aspiring genin teams throughout Konoha's recent history. "All right," Kakashi said, standing before his 3 new students in the designated training ground, 2 small bells jingling softly from his belt. "The rules are simple. Retrieve a bell from me before noon, using any means necessary. Those who fail will be sent back to the academy." Sasuke's eyes narrowed with immediate calculation, already formulating a strategy. Sakura shifted nervously, glancing between her teammates. Naruto, for his part, simply grinned, an expression that, to Kakashi's practiced eye, seemed to carry more quiet confidence than the boys' academy record would suggest was warranted. The test began, and almost immediately, Kakashi found himself facing something considerably more complex than the straightforward exercise he had anticipated. Sasuke moved first, launching a series of well-executed shuriken and kunai strikes designed to test Kakashi's reactions, before attempting a direct taijutsu engagement that, while impressive for a genin, Kakashi deflected with practiced ease. Sakura, largely sidelined by her own uncertainty, attempted to remain hidden, gathering information rather than engaging directly. But it was Naruto who caught Kakashi entirely off guard. Rather than the brash, direct assault Kakashi had expected based on the boy's reputation and academy records, Naruto approached with unexpected tactical patience, remaining hidden at the tree line, his chakra signature deliberately suppressed to a degree that momentarily confused even Kakashi's own considerable sensory awareness. When Naruto finally made his move, it wasn't a headlong charge, but a carefully coordinated series of shadow clones, deployed with a level of chakra efficiency and tactical placement that seemed distinctly at odds with his supposed academic mediocrity, designed to create overlapping angles of attack that forced Kakashi to actually commit genuine effort to countering, rather than his usual relaxed, one-handed engagement. Kakashi's visible eye widened slightly behind his mask as he deflected a clone's kunai strike, only to find himself forced to sidestep an unexpected, thin golden chain that lashed out from the underbrush, narrowly missing his ankle. "Interesting," Kakashi murmured to himself, recognizing the technique immediately from old historical records regarding Uzushiogakure clan techniques. Records few shinobi outside specialized archives would have any reason to be familiar with. Where had a 12-year-old genin learned something like that? He allowed the test to continue a while longer, deliberately probing Naruto's capabilities further, genuinely curious now rather than simply going through the motions of a standard evaluation. By the test conclusion, during which Kakashi ultimately allowed Sasuke and Sakura to work together to retrieve a bell through his engineered lesson about teamwork, while carefully avoiding revealing his own growing curiosity regarding Naruto's unusual capabilities, the copy ninja found himself with considerably more questions than he'd anticipated heading into his new team assignment. That evening, following the team's official pass into active genin status, Kakashi made a quiet visit to the Hokage's office. "Naruto Uzumaki," Kakashi said without preamble, settling into the chair across from Hiruzen's desk. His combat capabilities during the bell test were considerably beyond what his academy records would suggest. Hiruzen's expression remained carefully neutral, though something knowing flickered behind his aged eyes. "Is that so? Chakra suppression techniques advanced enough to briefly evade my own sensory perception. Shadow clone deployment with tactical sophistication I wouldn't expect from most chunin, let alone a fresh genin." And Kakashi added, his single visible eye narrowing slightly, what appeared to be a variant of Uzushiogakure chakra chain techniques, deployed with surprising precision. Hiruzen allowed a small, measured sigh, recognizing that with Kakashi now directly overseeing Naruto's development as his Jonin instructor, The time had come to share at least a portion of the carefully guarded truth. "Sit down, Kakashi," Hiruzen said. "There's a great deal about Naruto's abilities you'll need to understand, if you're going to guide him properly moving forward." Over the following hour, Hiruzen carefully explained the situation, the awakening of Naruto's full Uzumaki bloodline inheritance during the sealing ritual years earlier, the secret training arranged under Torian Kazama's guidance, and the deliberate effort to mask the true extent of the boy's capabilities from wider village knowledge until he was mature enough to handle both the power itself and the attention it would inevitably draw. Kakashi listened with the same calm, measured attention that had defined his career as one of Konoha's most capable shinobi, though the information clearly gave him considerable pause. "That's an extraordinary amount of responsibility for a 12-year-old to carry," Kakashi said finally, once Hiruzen had concluded his explanation. "It is," Hiruzen agreed. "Which is precisely why I need you, as his Jonin instructor, to help guide him carefully, encouraging appropriate use of his abilities without either suppressing his growth or allowing overconfidence to develop given his considerable advantages over his peers." Kakashi nodded slowly, already turning over the practical implications in his mind. "I'll handle it carefully," he said, "though I imagine Sasuke, in particular, may struggle if he begins to suspect Naruto has been quietly outpacing him all along." Hiruzen's expression grew thoughtful. "That, Kakashi, will need to be managed delicately as your team's missions progress. Sasuke's ambitions and Naruto's true capabilities may prove a complicated dynamic to navigate." Team 7's early D-rank missions passed largely uneventfully, the team completing menial village tasks, chasing down a particularly troublesome cat, assisting with local farm labor, minor construction assistance, that gave Naruto ample opportunity to continue his carefully practiced restraint, completing tasks with just enough competence to avoid suspicion, while privately itching for genuine opportunities to test his abilities in more meaningful circumstances. That opportunity arrived sooner than the team anticipated, when Kakashi successfully petitioned for Team 7's first C-rank mission, escorting a bridge builder named Tazuna safely back to his home in the Land of Waves, ostensibly a straightforward, low-risk assignment. It was anything but. Within the first day of travel, Team 7 encountered two misaffiliated Chunin, the Demon Brothers, whose ambush revealed Tazuna's deliberate deception regarding the mission's true danger level. The old bridge builder had significantly downplayed the risks involved, desperate for Konoha's assistance despite lacking the funds to properly compensate for a mission of appropriate rank. The Demon Brothers' initial ambush, bursting from concealment beneath a large puddle along the roadside, caught Sasuke and Sakura genuinely off guard, though Naruto, his sensory range having detected the suspicious chakra concealment several dozen meters before the ambush triggered, had already subtly adjusted his positioning to protect Tazuna without drawing attention to his early awareness. When the chained weapon connecting the two missed shinobi lunged toward Kakashi in their opening assault, an attack seemingly designed to eliminate the team's Jonin instructor before he could properly respond, Naruto moved with a speed and precision that shocked his teammates. A single golden chakra chain shot from Naruto's forearm, intercepting the Demon Brothers' weapon mid-strike with a resounding metallic clang, deflecting the attack just enough to allow Kakashi, who had, in truth, deliberately allowed the initial assault to proceed further than strictly necessary in order to observe his students' reactions, to complete his own counter-technique, safely restraining both attacking shinobi. Sasuke and Sakura stared at Naruto in stunned silence, the golden chain retracting smoothly back into his forearm as though it had never been there at all. "Naruto," Sasuke said slowly, dark eyes narrowed with a complex mixture of suspicion and grudging surprise. "What was that?" Naruto rubbed the back of his neck sheepishly, having not intended to reveal quite that much so early into the mission. Clan technique? Sorta a secret family thing." "That was no ordinary clan technique," Sasuke pressed, his tone carrying an edge of genuine unease. "That was a discussion for later," Kakashi interrupted smoothly, recognizing the need to defuse the situation before it derailed the mission's immediate priorities. "Right now, we need to address Tazuna-san's dishonesty regarding this mission's true rank." The tense confrontation that followed, during which Tazuna tearfully explained the desperate circumstances surrounding his homeland's oppression under the wealthy, ruthless businessman Gato, and the critical importance of completing the bridge that represented his people's only hope for economic independence, ultimately resulted in the team's collective decision to continue the mission despite its clearly elevated danger level, a decision Kakashi supported given his belief in his team's growing capabilities, Naruto's hidden strength chief among his considerations. But the encounter with the demon brothers had planted seeds of curiosity and unease within Sasuke that would only deepen as the mission progressed. The following days in the Land of Waves proved a delicate balancing act for Naruto, torn between his natural instinct to protect his teammates using the full extent of his abilities, and the careful restraint Torian's training had impressed upon him regarding premature revelation of his true capabilities. His sensory range, now extended even further through years of dedicated practice, allowed him to detect potential threats, including a lurking presence he correctly identified as considerably more dangerous than the demon brothers. Well before his teammates, or even Kakashi's own trained perception picked up on the same signals. "Someone's watching us," Naruto murmured quietly to Kakashi one evening, as the team settled into Tezuna's modest home for the night. "Been feeling it on and off since yesterday. Feels strong. Stronger than those two guys from before." Kakashi's expression sharpened slightly, though he kept his tone carefully casual for the benefit of Sasuke and Sakura, seated nearby. "How far away?" "Hard to say exactly," Naruto said, brow furrowing in concentration. "Maybe a few kilometers? It's weird though, feels like it's testing us, not attacking." Kakashi nodded slowly, filing away the information. Naruto's assessment, he suspected, was almost certainly accurate, likely indicating the presence of Zabuza Momochi, the infamous Mist Swordsman whose reputation for ruthless efficiency preceded him considerably throughout the shinobi world. If Zabuza was indeed scouting the team's capabilities before committing to a direct confrontation, it would explain the pattern of intermittent chakra presence Naruto had described. "Stay alert," Kakashi instructed quietly. "But don't reveal anything more than necessary until we understand exactly what we're dealing with." Naruto nodded, understanding the delicate balance his sensei was asking him to maintain. The confrontation, when it finally arrived several days later, proved every bit as dangerous as Naruto's early warnings had suggested. Zabuza Momochi emerged from a thick mist that seemed to materialize from nowhere, his massive cleaver-like sword resting casually across his shoulder as he addressed Kakashi directly, clearly recognizing his fellow shinobi's reputation. "The copy ninja, Kakashi of the Sharingan," Zabuza said, a cruel smile playing at the edges of his bandaged face. "I'll admit, I'm almost flattered Konoha sent someone of your caliber for such a simple job." Kakashi's visible eye narrowed, his hand already moving toward the concealed forehead protector covering his own Sharingan. "Zabuza Momochi, the demon of the hidden mist. I'd say the honor's mutual." The ensuing battle proved intense even by experienced Jonin standards. Zabuza's masterful command of the silent killing technique and the surrounding mist creating a genuinely dangerous environment that tested even Kakashi's considerable skill. But it was during this confrontation that Naruto's carefully hidden sensory abilities proved decisively valuable. As Zabuza's technique blanketed the surrounding area in thick, disorienting mist, obscuring even Kakashi's Sharingan-enhanced perception at certain critical moments, Naruto's sensory range, far exceeding what any normal genin, or even most jonin, should possess, allowed him to track Zabuza's precise movements and positioning with startling accuracy. "Sensei, he's circling to your left, maybe 15 meters, closing fast," Naruto called out at a critical juncture, his warning allowing Kakashi to narrowly avoid what would have otherwise been a devastating surprise attack. Zabuza's eyes narrowed with genuine surprise, clearly not expecting a mere genin to possess sensory capabilities sufficient to track his movements through his own concealing mist technique. "That brat," he muttered, reassessing his approach with newfound wariness. The battle eventually reached its dramatic climax through Kakashi's clever use of a water clone and subsequent Sharingan copy technique to seemingly defeat Zabuza, though the arrival of a masked hunter Nin, in reality, Zabuza's young companion Haku in disguise, who claimed the apparent kill before retreating with Zabuza's unconscious body, left the true outcome considerably more ambiguous than it initially appeared. As the team regrouped following the confrontation, Kakashi, visibly fatigued from both the battle itself and the strain of extended Sharingan usage, turned a considering gaze toward Naruto. "Your sensory abilities proved invaluable during that fight," Kakashi said carefully, aware that Sasuke and Sakura remained within earshot. We'll need to discuss the full extent of your training at some point, Naruto. But for now, good work. Naruto nodded, understanding the unspoken acknowledgement passing between them, even as Sasuke's dark eyes studied him with an intensity that suggested his earlier suspicions had only deepened considerably. The days that followed, as Kakashi recovered from his chakra exhaustion and the team settled into an uneasy waiting period anticipating Zabuza's inevitable return, brought a rare moment of quiet conversation between Naruto and Sasuke, one that would subtly reshape the complex dynamic developing between the two young shinobi. They found themselves alone one evening, seated on the porch outside Tazuna's home as the sun set over the surrounding forest, Sakura having retired early and Kakashi still resting following his earlier exertion. That chain technique, Sasuke said finally, breaking the comfortable silence that had settled between them. And your sensory range during the fight with Zabuza. That's not standard academy training, Naruto. Where did you actually learn that? Naruto considered his response carefully, weighing Torian's repeated warnings about premature revelation against his own growing recognition that continued secrecy, particularly from his own teammates, carried genuine risks to effective teamwork and trust. My mom's clan, Naruto said finally, deciding on a careful, partial truth. The Uzumaki clan had some pretty unique abilities: chakra chains, strong sensory stuff, chakra reserves way bigger than normal. I've been training with someone who used to be from my mom's old village, learning to control it properly. Sasuke's dark eyes studied him with an unreadable intensity. You've been hiding this all this time at the academy, pretending to barely pass. It wasn't quite a question, and Naruto didn't attempt to deny it. Yeah, he admitted. Figured it was safer that way, at least till I actually understood what I was doing, and wasn't gonna accidentally hurt someone or myself trying to show off too early. Sasuke was quiet for a long moment, processing this information against the backdrop of his own singular, driving ambition, the relentless pursuit of strength necessary to eventually confront his brother, Itachi, and avenge his clan's tragic destruction. You could have told me, Sasuke said finally, something almost bitter entering his tone. We're supposed to be teammates. I know, Naruto said, and he meant it genuinely. It wasn't about not trusting you, Sasuke. It was complicated. Still kind of is. There's people who'd probably try to use what I can do if they found out too early, before I was ready to handle it properly. Sasuke's expression shifted slightly, something like grudging understanding beginning to temper his earlier suspicion. He, too, understood intimately the weight of carrying dangerous inheritance, the complicated burden of bloodline legacy, his own Sharingan a constant reminder of both his clan's tragic fate and the lonely path of vengeance he had set himself upon. Fine, Sasuke said finally. But if we're going to keep working together, I need to know I can trust you completely. No more hiding things that could get one of us killed. Deal? Naruto agreed, extending a hand. Sasuke studied the gesture for a moment before accepting it, a rare, if reluctant, understanding passing between the two young shinobi, the beginning of a complicated but genuine mutual respect that would prove considerably different from the often antagonistic rivalry that had historically defined their relationship. The battle's true climax arrived days later, as Zabuza, having recovered from his apparent defeat with Haku's assistance, launched a renewed assault on the incomplete bridge, accompanied by an army of hastily assembled thugs under the employ of the ruthless businessman Gato, whose own ambitions of eliminating both Zabuza and the bridge-building resistance entirely had grown increasingly apparent. The ensuing confrontation proved chaotic and dangerous, Kakashi once again engaging Zabuza directly in a rematch of considerable intensity, while Sasuke found himself locked in a desperate battle against Haku's deceptively elegant ice-release techniques. A confrontation that, in another timeline, might have ended in tragedy for the young Uchiha. But this time, Naruto's carefully honed abilities changed the entire trajectory of the battle. His sensory range detected Haku's rapid, nearly invisible movements within the crystalline ice mirrors surrounding Sasuke considerably faster than Sasuke's own developing Sharingan could track, allowing Naruto to intervene at a critical moment, chakra chains lashing out to disrupt Haku's technique just enough to prevent what would have otherwise been a potentially fatal strike against his teammate. Sasuke, duck! Naruto shouted, his chains catching Haku's Senbon mid-flight, deflecting the projectiles harmlessly aside. Haku, momentarily startled by this unexpected interference, retreated further into his ice mirror technique, reassessing his approach against this unexpectedly capable opponent. Your reflexes, Haku observed calmly from within the safety of his ice mirrors, are considerably beyond what I anticipated from a mere genin. Naruto grinned, chakra chains coiling protectively around himself and Sasuke as he prepared to press the advantage his sensory awareness afforded him. Yeah, well, I've been told that a lot lately. The subsequent exchange, considerably more evenly matched than the near one-sided confrontation that might have otherwise unfolded, ultimately concluded not through overwhelming victory, but through a moment of genuine understanding. Naruto's growing perceptiveness, honed through years of sensory training, allowing him to recognize the reluctant sorrow and complicated loyalty driving Haku's actions on Zabuza's behalf. You don't have to keep doing this, Naruto said during a brief lull in their exchange, something earnest and understanding entering his tone despite the ongoing danger of their confrontation. Fighting for someone who doesn't really care whether you live or die. Haku's masked expression remained unreadable, though something in his posture shifted slightly at Naruto's words. Zabuza-sama gave me purpose, when I had nothing else. That is not something so easily set aside. Meanwhile, across the battlefield, Kakashi's confrontation with Zabuza reached its own dramatic climax. The experienced Jonin instructor's Sharingan-enhanced Chidori technique poised to deliver what would have once been a decisive, potentially lethal strike, until Gato's own forces, having grown tired of paying for services no longer necessary given his private assassin's presence, revealed their own treacherous intentions, turning against both Zabuza and the exhausted bridge-building resistance alike. The sudden, unexpected betrayal shifted the entire battle's dynamic, Zabuza's fury at Gato's treachery ultimately leading to a dramatic, final confrontation between the disgraced Miss Swordsman and his former employer's mercenary forces, a battle that, this time, Naruto's team found themselves unexpectedly allied alongside Zabuza against Gato's considerably more numerous, but far less skilled, forces. By the confrontation's chaotic conclusion, Gato ultimately meeting his end at Zabuza's own blade in a moment of grim, poetic justice, while Haku's life was spared through Naruto's earlier intervention and Kakashi's own quiet mercy. Team 7 found themselves standing amid the wreckage of the battle, considerably more experienced and, in Naruto's case particularly, considerably more exposed regarding the true extent of his abilities than he had originally intended. As the team began their journey back toward Konoha following the bridge's eventual completion and Tazuna's tearful, grateful farewell, Kakashi found a quiet moment to speak privately with his young student. You did well, Naruto, Kakashi said, his tone carrying genuine, if characteristically understated, approval. Though I imagine Torian-sen and the Hokage will want a detailed report regarding just how much of your training you ended up revealing during this mission. Naruto rubbed the back of his neck sheepishly. Yeah, guess restraint kinda went out the window once things got serious. It happens, Kakashi said with a small, knowing smile beneath his mask. Sometimes protecting your teammates matters more than maintaining secrecy. I don't think anyone will fault you for that. That evening, following the team's return to Konoha, Kakashi made his way once more to the Hokage's office, delivering a detailed account of the mission's events, Naruto's chakra chains deployed publicly against the demon brothers, his sensory perception proving instrumental during the confrontations with both Zabuza and Haku, and his overall combat performance considerably exceeding what any standard genin, or even most chunin, should reasonably possess. Hiruzen listened with careful, measured attention, the weight of the report settling heavily across his aged features. It seems, Hiruzen said finally, once Kakashi had concluded his detailed account, that Naruto's full potential is beginning to reveal itself considerably faster than we may have originally anticipated. The genie, so to speak, may be difficult to put back in the bottle at this point, Kakashi agreed. Sasuke, in particular, seems to have gained considerable awareness regarding Naruto's true capabilities. Hiruzen's expression grew thoughtful, already turning over the practical and political implications of this development. We'll need to carefully monitor how this affects the broader shinobi community's perception, particularly given the upcoming Chunin exams. It may be time to begin preparing Naruto more directly for the eventual, inevitable revelation of his full abilities to a wider audience. Kakashi nodded slowly, understanding the gravity of what lay ahead. The Chunin exams will certainly provide that opportunity, one way or another. Hiruzen's gaze drifted toward the window, looking out over the village that had spent years unknowingly harboring a boy carrying the full, awakened inheritance of an entire fallen nation. Then let us ensure, the old Hokage said quietly, that when that revelation comes, it arrives on our terms, not those of anyone seeking to exploit what Naruto has become. 3 months had passed since Team 7's return from the Land of Waves, and in that time, something subtle but unmistakable had shifted in the dynamic between Naruto, Sasuke, and Sakura. The guarded secrecy that had once defined Naruto's relationship with his teammates had given way to a cautious, evolving trust. Sasuke, in particular, had taken to observing Naruto's training with a mixture of professional curiosity and quiet, competitive determination, while Sakura found herself increasingly drawn to understanding the boy she'd once dismissed as merely loud and directionless. It was Kakashi who delivered the news, gathering his team on a quiet training ground on an otherwise unremarkable morning. "I've nominated the 3 of you for the Chunin exams," he announced, holding out 3 official entry forms. "This is entirely voluntary. If any of you don't feel ready, there's no shame in waiting for the next cycle." Sakura took her form with visible nervousness. Sasuke accepted his with characteristic calm determination. Naruto, grinning ear to ear, snatched his form with barely contained excitement. Finally, Naruto said, "A real chance to prove myself." Kakashi studied him for a moment, his single visible eye carrying an unspoken understanding. "Just remember what we discussed, Naruto. Prove yourself, yes. But be mindful of how much you reveal, and when." Naruto's grin faltered slightly, sobering at the reminder. "Yeah. I know." The first stage of the Chunin exams took place in a cramped, tension-filled classroom. Over 100 genin from various villages packed shoulder to shoulder as the imposing, scar-faced Proctor Ibiki Marino explained the rules of the written examination with characteristic menace. Naruto glanced down at the test paper before him, and immediately understood the true nature of the challenge. The questions themselves were absurdly advanced, clearly designed to be nearly impossible for genuine genin-level shinobi to solve through conventional means. The actual test, Naruto realized with growing confidence, was about information-gathering methodology, cheating without getting caught, exactly the kind of resourcefulness a capable shinobi would need in real intelligence-gathering missions. But where most genin around him began nervously employing clumsy cheating techniques, hidden notes, whispered answers, poorly concealed hand signals, Naruto found himself approaching several of the questions with a confidence that surprised even him. Years of Fuinjutsu training under Torian's careful tutelage had given him an intuitive grasp of complex mathematical and logical principles that, while not directly related to the specific questions before him, provided enough of a conceptual foundation that he found himself genuinely solving several of the more analytically focused problems rather than needing to rely entirely on cheating. For the remaining questions, he employed a subtler version of the sensory perception Torian had spent years refining, carefully, cautiously extending his awareness just enough to detect the faint chakra signatures of nearby test-takers writing answers, without the more obvious information-gathering methods employed by his fellow examinees. By the time Ibiki called the test conclusion, revealing the true nature of the 10th question, a psychological gambit designed to test the examinee's resolve under pressure, Naruto found himself among a relatively small group who had genuinely answered a majority of the questions correctly through legitimate means, rather than through cheating alone. Ibiki's sharp eyes lingered on Naruto's test paper for a moment longer than strictly necessary as he reviewed the results, a flicker of genuine surprise crossing his usually impassive features. "Uzumaki," Ibiki murmured to himself, filing the observation away with quiet professional curiosity. The second stage, the infamous Forest of Death survival exercise, provided considerably more opportunity for Naruto's true capabilities to shine, even as he continued exercising careful restraint regarding the full extent of what he could do. Team 7 was assigned a Heaven Scroll, requiring them to secure a corresponding Earth Scroll from a rival team within the dense, dangerous forest before reaching the central tower within the allotted 5-day time limit. Naruto's sensory range, now extending well past 3 kilometers under focused concentration, proved immediately invaluable, allowing the team to identify potential threats and rival teams' positions with an accuracy that left even experienced proctors monitoring the exercise quietly impressed. "There's a team about half a kilometer northeast," Naruto reported quietly during their second day navigating the forest's dense undergrowth. Feels like they've got an earth scroll. Chakra signatures are steady, not too strong. Might be an easier target than risking a fight with someone stronger. Sasuke nodded, deferring to Naruto's assessment with a level of trust that would have seemed unthinkable months earlier. Let's move carefully. No unnecessary risks. The subsequent confrontation with the rival team, a group of genin from a smaller, lesser-known village, proved brief and decisive. Naruto's chakra chains ensnaring 2 of the 3 opposing shinobi before they could properly react, while Sasuke's own considerable taijutsu skill handled the third with practiced efficiency. But it was an unexpected, far more dangerous encounter during their 3rd day in the forest that truly tested the team's capabilities, and forced Naruto into a decision that would ultimately reveal the full extent of his abilities to a considerably wider audience than he had anticipated. Orochimaru, disguised as a grass village genin, had been observing Sasuke's Sharingan development with predatory interest throughout the exam, seeking an opportunity to implant his curse seal upon the young Uchiha as part of his broader, long-term ambitions regarding the Uchiha bloodline's potential. The confrontation, when it finally arrived, proved immediately and overwhelmingly dangerous. Orochimaru's overwhelming killing intent alone nearly paralyzed Sakura and left even Sasuke, for all his considerable talent, visibly shaken by the sheer, oppressive weight of the legendary Sanin's presence. Naruto, his sensory perception having detected something deeply unsettling about their supposed grass village opponent well before the confrontation fully escalated, found himself facing an opponent whose power dwarfed anything he had encountered or trained against throughout his years of careful preparation. Sasuke, get Sakura and run! Naruto shouted, chakra chains already beginning to form around his forearms as he moved to intercept Orochimaru's advance, buying his teammates precious seconds to retreat. Orochimaru's serpentine eyes studied Naruto with sudden, genuine interest, his earlier singular focus on Sasuke's Sharingan momentarily diverted by the unexpected display of chakra chains erupting from the blonde genin's arms. Interesting, Orochimaru mused, his voice carrying a chilling, silky quality that sent a shiver down Naruto's spine despite his best efforts at composure. Adamantine sealing chains. I hadn't expected to encounter such a technique here, of all places. You know what these are? Naruto asked, chains extending defensively before him as he attempted to buy time for Sasuke and Sakura's retreat. Of course, Orochimaru said, a slow, unsettling smile spreading across his pale features. Uzushiogakure clan techniques. Extraordinarily rare, and extraordinarily powerful in the right hands. Tell me, boy, how does an orphan from Konoha come to possess such an inheritance? Naruto said nothing, chains coiling tighter in preparation as he recognized, with growing dread, that he was facing an opponent whose skill and knowledge vastly exceeded his own considerable, but still developing capabilities. The brief, intense exchange that followed tested Naruto's abilities to their absolute limit. Orochimaru's overwhelming speed and combat experience allowed him to effortlessly dodge Naruto's chain strikes, his own retaliatory attacks, casual, almost lazy in their execution, nonetheless carrying enough raw power and killing intent to leave Naruto genuinely fighting for his life within moments of the engagement beginning. It was only Naruto's accelerated healing factor and considerable chakra reserves that allowed him to endure several strikes that would have proven fatal to an ordinary genin, buying just enough time for Sasuke, despite Naruto's explicit instruction to retreat, to return to the confrontation, unwilling to abandon his teammate to face such an overwhelming threat alone. Sasuke, I told you to run! Naruto shouted, blood trickling from a shallow wound along his forearm even as the injury visibly began healing at an accelerated rate that made Orochimaru's eyes narrow with fresh, calculating interest. Don't be an idiot, Sasuke snapped back, activating his own Sharingan as he moved to Naruto's side. We're a team. Orochimaru observed this brief exchange with an expression of profound, unsettling fascination. How touching, he mused. Though ultimately unnecessary. What followed was less a battle and more a demonstration of the vast gulf separating Orochimaru's abilities from even the combined efforts of 2 exceptionally talented genin. The Sannin toyed with both boys for several tense minutes, his casual, almost bored demeanor doing little to disguise the overwhelming lethality he could unleash at any moment should he choose to do so. Ultimately, Orochimaru's true objective remained fixed on Sasuke rather than eliminating either boy outright. In a moment of sudden, decisive action, he closed the distance between himself and the young Uchiha with terrifying speed, delivering the curse seal directly to the back of Sasuke's neck before Naruto's chains could intervene. The technique's mark burning painfully into Sasuke's skin as the boy collapsed, unconscious, from the sheer intensity of the seal's activation. Sasuke! Naruto shouted, chains lashing out furiously toward Orochimaru in a desperate, enraged attempt at retaliation, an attempt the Sannin dismissed with almost contemptuous ease, sidestepping the attack entirely. You needn't concern yourself further, little Uzumaki, Orochimaru said, already turning to depart, his objective for this encounter fully achieved. I suspect we'll cross paths again before long. Your potential, after all, is far too interesting to simply ignore. With that unsettling promise lingering in the air, Orochimaru retreated into the forest's dense undergrowth, leaving Naruto alone with his unconscious teammate and a considerably shaken Sakura, who had returned just in time to witness the confrontation's harrowing conclusion. The immediate aftermath of the encounter proved chaotic and dangerous. Naruto forced to carry Sasuke's unconscious form while simultaneously fending off an opportunistic attack from a rival team who had witnessed the confrontation's tail end and sought to exploit the team's evident vulnerability. It was during this desperate defensive struggle, protecting both Sasuke's unconscious form and Sakura's safety against multiple attacking genin while operating on rapidly depleting chakra reserves following his earlier confrontation with Orochimaru, that Naruto finally abandoned any remaining pretense of restraint regarding his full capabilities. Multiple shadow clones burst into existence around him, considerably more numerous and precisely coordinated than anything a standard genin should reasonably produce. His chakra chains lashed out with lethal, controlled precision, ensnaring and restraining attacking shinobi with a level of tactical sophistication that left the surrounding proctors, several of whom had been quietly observing the confrontation with growing professional astonishment, exchanging meaningful, surprised glances. By the time the immediate threat had been neutralized, Naruto standing protectively over his unconscious and semi-conscious teammates amid a scattered handful of restrained rival genin. Word of the encounter had already begun spreading quietly through the ranks of observing proctors and, inevitably, toward the ears of the various Kage and dignitaries present to oversee the exam's proceedings. Uzumaki, one proctor murmured to a colleague as they observed the aftermath from a concealed vantage point. Did you see that? Chains, dozens of coordinated shadow clones, and reserves deep enough to sustain that level of output even after apparently already fighting Orochimaru himself. I saw it, the other proctor replied, equally troubled. This needs to reach the Hokage immediately. News of the encounter reached Hiruzen within hours, delivered through a hastily arranged private briefing from the senior proctors overseeing the exam. The old Hokage listened with grave, measured attention as the details unfolded. Orochimaru's confirmed presence within the exam disguised as a grass village genin, the cursed seal's placement upon Sasuke, and Naruto's subsequent display of considerable, previously concealed combat capabilities in the ensuing chaos. It seems, Hiruzen said quietly, once the briefing concluded, that Naruto's full potential has finally become impossible to fully conceal. Torian Kazama, present for the briefing given the clearly escalating relevance of his years of careful tutelage, nodded gravely. Given Orochimaru's direct interest in the boy, continued secrecy may no longer serve a meaningful protective purpose. If anything, revealing the full extent of Naruto's capabilities publicly, under controlled circumstances, may prove a more effective deterrent against those who might otherwise underestimate him. Hiruzen considered this for a long moment, the weight of years spent carefully protecting Naruto's secret settling heavily upon his aged shoulders. Perhaps, he said finally, it is time to allow the boy's true strength to be witnessed by the wider shinobi world, not as a vulnerability to be exploited, but as a clear demonstration that Konoha's next generation carries strength few would dare underestimate. Team 7, despite the harrowing encounter, ultimately succeeded in securing an Earth Scroll from the defeated rival team, and reaching the central tower within the allotted time limit, Sasuke's condition stabilizing under medical attention despite the lingering, troubling presence of Orochimaru's curse seal now marked upon his neck. The preliminary matches that followed, intended to narrow the considerable number of qualifying genin down to a more manageable roster for the exam's final, public tournament stage, provided Naruto with his first genuinely public demonstration of the full extent of his carefully honed abilities. His opponent, a capable genin from a smaller allied village, entered the match with reasonable confidence given Naruto's still relatively unknown reputation among the wider assembly of competing shinobi and observing dignitaries. That confidence evaporated within the match's opening moments. Naruto's chakra chains erupted with practiced precision, ensnaring his opponent's limbs before the other genin could properly react, while a rapid succession of tactically deployed shadow clones overwhelmed any attempt at counterattack. The match concluded in barely a minute. Naruto's opponent forced into surrender, restrained helplessly by golden chakra chains before the assembled crowd of shinobi, dignitaries, and rival village representatives. A ripple of stunned murmurs spread through the observation gallery. Among the assembled dignitaries, several experienced shinobi from allied and rival villages alike exchanged sharp, meaningful glances, quietly recognizing the distinctive golden chains for exactly what they represented. Techniques believed lost decades earlier alongside Uzushiogakures' tragic destruction. Adamantine sealing chains, murmured an elderly Kumogaku representative, his weathered expression carrying genuine shock. I haven't seen those since before the Third Great War. The boys in Uzumaki, another observer replied quietly. Konoha's kept this rather quiet, haven't they? Among the crowd, disguised once more and observing with predatory, calculating interest, Orochimaru watched Naruto's decisive victory with an expression of deep, unsettling satisfaction. Magnificent, he murmured softly to himself, already turning over the considerable possibilities Naruto's confirmed, publicly demonstrated capabilities represented for his own long-term ambitions. Perhaps the Uchiha's Sharingan isn't the only inheritance worth pursuing from this generation. Following his decisive preliminary victory, Naruto found himself approached during a brief recess by a figure whose presence sent an immediate, instinctive chill down his spine. The same disguised grass village genin who had so thoroughly outmatched him within the forest days earlier. Impressive display, Orochimaru said quietly, his tone carrying a silky, unsettling warmth that did little to disguise the predatory intent lurking beneath. Your control over those chains has clearly progressed considerably since our brief encounter. Naruto's body tensed immediately, chakra chains instinctively beginning to form beneath his sleeves in preparation for a potential confrontation, though he was careful to maintain outward composure given the presence of numerous observing shinobi and dignitaries who would certainly notice any overt hostility within the tournament grounds. What do you want? Naruto asked, his voice carrying a wary edge that belied his outward calm. Merely to offer a genuine observation, Orochimaru said, his serpentine eyes studying Naruto with unsettling intensity. You carry an extraordinary inheritance, young Uzumaki, one that, properly cultivated, could surpass even the considerable power currently residing within your body courtesy of a certain other resident. Naruto's eyes narrowed sharply, understanding the veiled reference to Kurama's presence. You know about that too? I make it a point to understand potential, Orochimaru said simply. And you, Naruto Uzumaki, represent considerable potential indeed. Konoha, I suspect, understands this as well, which is precisely why they've kept your true capabilities so carefully concealed until circumstances forced their hand. What's your point? Naruto pressed, growing increasingly uncomfortable with the conversation's unsettling implications. Orochimaru's smile widened slightly, an expression carrying more menace than warmth. Only that power such as yours inevitably attracts attention, boy. Konoha's protection, however well-intentioned, may ultimately prove insufficient against those who recognize your full value. Should you ever find their guidance limiting, I would be more than willing to offer considerably more direct instruction toward achieving your fullest potential. I'll pass, Naruto said flatly, taking a deliberate step back, chains still coiled protectively beneath his sleeves. Orochimaru chuckled softly, entirely unbothered by the rejection. A pity. But the offer, I assure you, remains open should circumstances change. With that unsettling parting statement, he retreated into the surrounding crowd, leaving Naruto standing alone, a cold unease settling deep within his chest. He made his way immediately to report the unsettling encounter to Kakashi, who listened with grave, focused attention before insisting on escorting Naruto directly to a private meeting with Hiruzen regarding the troubling development. He approached you directly, Hiruzen said, his tone carrying deep concern as Naruto recounted the unsettling conversation within the privacy of the Hokage's temporary quarters near the exam grounds. That's considerably more direct interest than I would have anticipated, even given his confirmed presence and involvement with Sasuke's condition. He offered to train me, Naruto said, still visibly unsettled by the encounter's implications. Said Konoha's protection might not be enough, that he could help me reach my fullest potential, or whatever. Hiruzen's expression grew grave, exchanging a meaningful glance with Torian, who had also been summoned to the private briefing given the escalating relevance of the situation. Orochimaru's interest in powerful, gifted shinobi has historically proven considerably dangerous, Torian said quietly. His pursuit of forbidden techniques and enhanced human capabilities is well documented among those familiar with his history. If he's expressed direct interest in cultivating your abilities, Naruto, it likely stems from recognizing the full extent of your inherited potential that, if properly nurtured under his influence rather than Konoha's careful guidance, could prove exceptionally dangerous. I'm not gonna go with him, Naruto said firmly, though a flicker of understandable unease remained evident beneath his determined tone. No way. Konoha's my home. You guys have looked out for me since I was a little kid. Hiruzen's expression softened slightly at the boy's evident loyalty, though the underlying concern regarding Orochimaru's continued interest remained clearly unresolved. I don't doubt your loyalty, Naruto, but we'll need to remain vigilant regarding further attempts at manipulation or recruitment, particularly given the considerable stakes involved should Orochimaru succeed in swaying your allegiance, or worse, forcibly extract the knowledge and power you carry through less consensual means. What do we do? Naruto asked, genuine concern evident in his expression. For now, Hiruzen said, continue as you have been, carefully, deliberately developing your abilities under Torian's guidance, while remaining alert to any further attempts at contact from Orochimaru or his associates. The tournament stage of the exam will proceed as planned, but will significantly increase security precautions given the confirmed threat his presence represents. The month-long preparation period leading up to the exam's final tournament stage passed with a mixture of intensified training and growing unease throughout Konoha's shinobi ranks. Word of Orochimaru's confirmed involvement in the Chunin exams, and his direct approach toward Naruto, spreading quietly but persistently among the village's higher-ranking shinobi and administrative officials. Naruto used the preparation period to deepen his training under Torian's continued guidance, focusing particularly on refining his chakra chain techniques toward more advanced applications, defensive barrier formations, precision restraint techniques capable of neutralizing considerably more powerful opponents than his earlier straightforward binding attacks, and further expansion of his already formidable sensory range. Given Orochimaru's confirmed interest and his historical tendency toward direct confrontation when his ambitions are threatened, Torian explained during one particularly intense training session, it would be prudent to develop techniques capable of addressing threats considerably beyond typical genin, or even Chunin-level opponents. Naruto nodded seriously, understanding the gravity of Torian's concern. You think he's gonna try something during the actual tournament? I consider it a genuine possibility, Torian admitted. Orochimaru's ambitions rarely proceed through purely passive means. Whatever his ultimate objective regarding Sasuke's cursed seal and his expressed interest in your own capabilities, I would not be surprised to see him attempt some manner of direct action during the tournament's proceedings, particularly given the considerable audience of dignitaries and shinobi from across the great nations that event will attract. This grim assessment proved to weigh heavily on both Hiruzen and the broader Konoha shinobi leadership as preparations for the tournament's security continued. Additional ANBU operatives quietly stationed throughout the arena grounds, and careful, discreet monitoring established regarding any suspicious activity or unusual chakra signatures that might indicate Orochimaru's continued presence or preparation for potential hostile action. As the day of the tournament's opening approached, Naruto found himself standing once more in the familiar training ground where his journey had first begun years earlier, the same location where chains had first uncontrollably burst from his young, frightened form, and where Torian had first guided him through the fundamentals of Fuinjutsu that had since grown into considerable mastery. Hiruzen joined him there on the evening before the tournament's commencement, the old Hokage's weathered expression carrying a complex mixture of pride and grave concern regarding what lay ahead. You've grown remarkably, Naruto, Hiruzen said quietly, settling onto a nearby bench as Naruto continued practicing careful, precise chain manipulation exercises in the fading evening light. From that frightened child years ago to the shinobi standing before me now. Feels weird, Naruto admitted, chains retracting smoothly as he turned to face the old Hokage. Everyone's gonna see everything tomorrow. No more hiding what I can really do. Are you frightened? Hiruzen asked gently. Naruto considered the question seriously for a long moment. A little, he admitted. Mostly about Orochimaru, and what he might try. But also, he paused, searching for the right words, also kind of excited, I guess? Like, finally, people are gonna see me for what I actually am. Not just some random troublemaker everyone looks down on. Hiruzen smiled warmly, understanding the deep, complicated significance of that sentiment given the years Naruto had spent enduring the village's casual disdain and suspicion. Tomorrow, the wider shinobi world will begin to understand exactly what remarkable potential Konoha has quietly nurtured all these years. I have no doubt you'll represent our village, and your mother's legacy, admirably. Naruto nodded, a determined resolve settling firmly across his youthful features. I'm not gonna let you down, old man Hokage. Or Torian-sensei. Or my mom, whatever happens tomorrow, with the tournament, with Orochimaru, whatever, I'm ready. Hiruzen placed a gentle, reassuring hand upon the boy's shoulder. I have no doubt of that, Naruto. Whatever challenges tomorrow brings, I trust you'll face them with the same courage and determination that has defined your journey thus far. As the sun finally dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the quiet training ground, neither Naruto nor Hiruzen could have fully anticipated just how dramatically the following day's events would reshape not only Naruto's own path forward, but the broader trajectory of the entire village's future, as Orochimaru's carefully laid plans finally moved toward their inevitable, violent culmination. The morning of the Chunin exam finals dawned clear and bright over Konoha, the village's central arena already filling with spectators, dignitaries, and shinobi from across the great nations, all eager to witness the culmination of weeks of grueling competition. Banners bearing the symbols of allied villages fluttered in the gentle breeze, and the air carried the electric buzz of anticipation that always accompanied such a significant diplomatic and martial event. Naruto stood among the gathered finalists in the arena's holding area, his heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and lingering unease. Word of his confrontation with the disguised Orochimaru during the preliminary matches had spread through certain circles, and though the wider civilian population remained largely unaware of the full implications, the shinobi in attendance, particularly the more experienced jonin and visiting dignitaries, watched him with a new, calculating interest that hadn't existed weeks earlier. Hiruzen sat in the Hokage's viewing box alongside the visiting Kazekage, in truth, Orochimaru in elaborate disguise, having assassinated the true Kazekage weeks earlier as part of his meticulously planned invasion. The old Hokage's expression remained carefully composed, though beneath his calm exterior, every sense remained sharpened, alert to the slightest hint of the betrayal he suspected was coming. Torian had positioned himself discreetly within the crowd, his trained eyes scanning the surrounding rooftops and shadowed alcoves for any sign of hostile movement, while additional ANBU operatives, stationed at Hiruzen's explicit instruction following Naruto's report of Orochimaru's direct approach, maintained careful, unobtrusive watch throughout the arena's perimeter. The tournament's early matches proceeded with the expected drama and skill on display, various genin from Konoha and allied villages demonstrating their hard-earned abilities before the assembled crowd. Naruto's own match, scheduled for the middle of the day's proceedings, arrived with the same nervous anticipation that had settled over him since the mission to Wave Country had first begun peeling back the careful secrecy surrounding his abilities. His opponent, a skilled young shinobi from the hidden sand, entered the arena with confident, measured steps, clearly aware of Naruto's reputation following the preliminary rounds but no less determined to prove himself. The match, when it began, showcased the full, controlled elegance of years of careful training. Naruto's chakra chains moved with practiced precision, deflecting his opponent's sand-based techniques with calculated efficiency, while his shadow clones created tactical openings that allowed him to gradually wear down his opponent's defenses. The crowd watched in stunned silence as the battle unfolded, murmurs of astonishment rippling through the stands as spectators, many of whom had never witnessed the legendary techniques of Uzushiogakure, outside of historical accounts, recognized the golden chains for what they represented. The match concluded with Naruto's decisive, restrained victory, his opponent conceding gracefully after finding himself thoroughly outmaneuvered. As Naruto raised a hand in acknowledgement of the crowd's astonished applause, his sensory perception, now honed to an almost preternatural degree, detected something deeply unsettling shifting within the arena's atmosphere. A subtle, coordinated buildup of chakra signatures, positioned strategically throughout the crowd and surrounding rooftops, all converging with an unmistakable, malevolent purpose. Naruto's eyes widened slightly as he made his way back toward the holding area, his heart rate quickening with dawning realization. He caught Kakashi's gaze across the arena and offered the subtlest of nods, a prearranged signal the two had discussed in the days leading up to the tournament, indicating Naruto's sensory perception had detected something amiss. Kakashi's expression sharpened almost imperceptibly, already moving to alert the nearby ANBU operatives stationed discreetly throughout the arena. But the warning, ultimately, arrived only moments before the invasion's opening move. The signal came in the form of a massive, sickly purple barrier suddenly erupting around the Hokage's viewing box, sealing Hiruzen within alongside the disguised Kazekage, Orochimaru finally shedding his elaborate disguise to reveal his true, serpentine features before the shocked assembly of dignitaries and spectators. Sarutobi-sensei, Orochimaru said, his voice carrying a chilling, almost affectionate quality as he addressed his former teacher directly. It's been far too long. Chaos erupted throughout the arena as the true scope of the coordinated invasion became devastatingly apparent. Sound and Sand Shinobi, the latter having been coerced or deceived into participating in Orochimaru's scheme through manipulation of their own leadership, poured into the village from multiple directions, engaging Konoha's shinobi forces in brutal, sudden combat throughout the streets and rooftops surrounding the arena. Naruto, caught in the immediate aftermath of the barrier's activation, found himself separated from his teammates amid the arena's panicked, scrambling crowd. His sensory perception, straining under the chaotic influx of countless chakra signatures now flooding the battlefield, nonetheless allowed him to quickly orient himself amid the confusion. Sakura! Sasuke! He called out, chakra chains already extending protectively as he moved to shield a group of frightened civilians from a sound shinobi's sudden, opportunistic attack. His chains lashed out with lethal precision, ensnaring the attacking shinobi before he could complete his assault, the golden restraints holding firm despite the enemy's frantic struggling. Naruto! Sakura's voice called out from across the chaotic arena floor, the pink-haired kunoichi fighting her way through the panicked crowd toward him, Sasuke close behind her, his expression grim and focused despite the lingering effects of Orochimaru's curse seals still marked upon his neck. We need to help evacuate the civilians first, Naruto said quickly, chains retracting as he turned to address his teammates. Then we find Kakashi-sensei and figure out what's happening with the Hokage. The trio worked quickly and efficiently, guiding terrified civilians toward designated evacuation routes while fending off scattered sound and sand shinobi attempting to exploit the chaos. Naruto's expanded sensory range proved invaluable throughout this desperate effort, allowing the team to anticipate ambushes and identify safe evacuation corridors that other, less perceptive shinobi might have missed entirely amid the battlefield's overwhelming confusion. Within the sealed barrier surrounding the Hokage's viewing box, a battle of far greater significance had already begun, one that would determine not just the immediate fate of the invasion, but the entire trajectory of Konoha's future leadership. Orochimaru discarded the last vestiges of his Kazekage disguise, his true form emerging with unsettling, serpentine grace as he faced his former teacher directly. You've grown reckless in your old age, Sarutobi-sensei, Orochimaru said, a cold smile playing across his pale features. Allowing your prized student to develop such remarkable capabilities, only to keep him hidden away like a secret weapon rather than utilizing his full potential. Naruto's development was never intended as a weapon to be wielded, Orochimaru, Hiruzen replied evenly, already settling into a defensive stance as he prepared for what he understood would likely prove the final confrontation of his long, storied life. Something you, in your relentless pursuit of power, have clearly never understood. Sentiment, Orochimaru scoffed, his tone carrying genuine derision. It's precisely that kind of misguided philosophy that led our village to squander such extraordinary potential for years, hiding the boy away rather than properly cultivating his abilities toward Konoha's greater strength. His abilities were never meant to be exploited for conquest, Hiruzen countered sharply, unlike your own twisted ambitions. The battle that followed proved every bit as devastating and consequential as history had always intended. Orochimaru's forbidden impure world reincarnation technique summoning the first and second Hokages to the battlefield, forcing Hiruzen into an increasingly desperate confrontation against overwhelming odds even as his own considerable skill and experience allowed him to hold his own with remarkable, hard-fought determination. Yet even as this pivotal confrontation unfolded within the sealed barrier, word of Naruto's remarkable capabilities, now fully publicly displayed before the assembled crowd during the earlier tournament matches, had already begun influencing the broader battlefield's dynamics in ways Orochimaru himself hadn't fully anticipated. Throughout the village, as Konoha's shinobi forces scrambled to repel the coordinated invasion, whispers of the Uzumaki heir and his displayed chakra chains spread rapidly among both defending shinobi and, more critically, the invading forces themselves, many of whom had heard historical accounts of Uzushiogakures' fearsome reputation and found themselves genuinely unsettled by the confirmation that such techniques had resurfaced within Konoha's ranks. Naruto, Sasuke, and Sakura eventually reunited with Kakashi near the village's central district, the copy ninja's expression grave as he quickly assessed his team's condition. The Hokage is trapped within a barrier with Orochimaru, Kakashi explained urgently, having received updates through hastily relayed shinobi communication networks. Several senior jonin are attempting to break through, but the barrier's construction is proving considerably resilient. We have to help him, Naruto said immediately, his expression set with fierce determination. The barrier requires specialized techniques to breach safely, Kakashi cautioned. Direct assault risks destabilizing it in ways that could prove catastrophic for everyone inside, including the Hokage himself. Naruto's mind raced, drawing upon years of Torian's careful Fuinjutsu instruction. What kind of barrier is it? Can you describe the seal pattern? Kakashi relayed what details he'd gathered from the jonin attempting to breach the technique, and Naruto's expression sharpened with sudden, dawning recognition. That's a four-corner sealing barrier, Naruto said, drawing upon knowledge Torian had painstakingly imparted regarding advanced historical Fuinjutsu techniques employed by his mother's clan during Uzushiogakures era. It's designed to be broken from specific angles, requiring simultaneous release from all four corner points. If we can coordinate with the jonin already attempting the breach, and add my own chakra to stabilize the release pattern, we might be able to open it safely. Kakashi's visible eye widened slightly with genuine surprise. You're certain of this? Torian-sensei taught me about barrier seals specifically because he said Uzushiogakure specialized in them, Naruto said firmly. This is exactly the kind of thing I've been training for. Kakashi hesitated only a moment longer before nodding decisively. Then let's move. Sasuke, Sakura, continue assisting with the village's defense. Naruto, you're with me. The path toward the sealed barrier proved fraught with danger. Kakashi and Naruto forced to fight through scattered pockets of sound and sand shinobi attempting to prevent reinforcements from reaching the besieged Hokage. Naruto's chains proved instrumental throughout this desperate journey, ensnaring and neutralizing threats with an efficiency that left Kakashi quietly, genuinely impressed despite the dire circumstances. Upon reaching the barrier's location, they found several senior jonin already positioned at two of the technique's four corner points, their expressions grim with the strain of their ongoing, so far unsuccessful efforts to breach the powerful seal. We need someone at the remaining two corners, one of the jonin called out urgently as Kakashi and Naruto approached. But breaking this technique requires precise Fuinjutsu knowledge that. I can help with that, Naruto interrupted, already moving toward one of the vacant corner positions, his hands beginning to form the intricate seals Torian had drilled into him through countless hours of dedicated practice. The assembled jonin exchanged uncertain, skeptical glances, clearly unconvinced that a genin, regardless of his displayed capabilities during the tournament, could genuinely contribute meaningfully to breaching such an advanced, historically significant sealing technique. Trust him, Kakashi said firmly, moving to take up position at the barrier's remaining corner. I've seen what he's capable of. With Kakashi's explicit endorsement lending Naruto the necessary credibility, the assembled shinobi began coordinating their efforts, channeling chakra simultaneously into the barrier's 4 corner points according to Naruto's carefully explained methodology. The technique proved excruciatingly difficult, the barrier's construction resisting their combined efforts with stubborn, malevolent resilience. Sweat beaded across Naruto's brow as he poured increasing amounts of his considerable chakra reserves into the effort, drawing upon reserves that, even after the day's earlier tournament match and subsequent combat throughout the village, remained remarkably deep thanks to his Uzumaki inheritance. "It's beginning to weaken," one of the jonin called out as cracks of golden light began spreading across the barrier's previously impenetrable surface. With one final, coordinated surge of combined chakra, the barrier shattered entirely, revealing the devastating scene within. Hiruzen, visibly exhausted and bearing the marks of a fierce, prolonged battle, locked in combat against Orochimaru amid the lingering, spectral forms of the reincarnated first and second Hokages. "Old man!" Naruto shouted, rushing forward the moment the barrier's collapse allowed entry, chakra chains already forming in preparation to assist however he could. Hiruzen, breathing heavily and clearly nearing the absolute limits of his considerable but aging endurance, managed a weak, grateful smile at the sight of his young protégé's arrival. "Naruto, you shouldn't be here. Like hell I'm just gonna stand outside while you fight this guy alone," Naruto said fiercely, positioning himself protectively despite the overwhelming danger radiating from Orochimaru's presence. Orochimaru's serpentine eyes studied Naruto's arrival with an unsettling mixture of genuine surprise and predatory delight. "How resourceful," he mused. "Breaching my barrier technique so quickly. Your Fuinjutsu instruction has clearly progressed considerably since our last encounter, little Uzumaki." "Get away from him," Naruto growled, chains lashing out toward Orochimaru in a desperate attempt to create distance between the exhausted Hokage and his overwhelming opponent. Orochimaru dodged the attack with characteristic, almost lazy ease, though his expression carried genuine, calculating interest as he assessed the full extent of Naruto's continued development. "Tell me, boy, have you reconsidered my earlier offer? Even now, facing me directly, surely you recognize the disparity in our respective capabilities. Under my tutelage, such gaps could be closed considerably faster than whatever careful, restrained instruction Konoha has provided you thus far." "I told you already," Naruto said firmly, chains coiling protectively as he positioned himself between Orochimaru and the visibly weakened Hokage. "I'll pass." Despite Naruto's determined interference, the fundamental disparity between his current capabilities and Orochimaru's vastly superior experience and raw power remained considerable. The Sannin toyed with both Naruto and the exhausted Hiruzen for several tense, dangerous minutes, his overwhelming skill allowing him to maintain the upper hand despite their combined, increasingly desperate efforts. It was during this dire confrontation that Hiruzen, recognizing the battle's ultimate, inevitable trajectory, made a fateful, deeply personal decision. "Naruto," the old Hokage said quietly, even as he continued exchanging blows against the reincarnated second Hokage's water techniques, "there's something I need you to understand, regardless of how this battle concludes." "Don't talk like that," Naruto said fiercely, chains lashing toward Orochimaru in a renewed, desperate assault. "We're gonna win this. Together." "Listen to me," Hiruzen insisted, his tone carrying an unmistakable gravity that gave Naruto sudden, genuine pause despite the battle's ongoing chaos. "You carry more than just your mother's inheritance, Naruto. You carry the hope of an entire fallen nation reborn. Whatever happens here today, Konoha's future, and perhaps the wider shinobi world's future as well, rests significantly upon the choices you make, and the wisdom with which you wield the considerable power you've inherited." Orochimaru, observing this exchange with evident, unsettling amusement, seized the opportunity presented by Hiruzen's momentary distraction to press his advantage, forcing the exhausted Hokage into an increasingly desperate defensive position. Naruto, understanding the dire implications of Hiruzen's words even as the battle's momentum shifted dangerously against them, felt something shift within him, a resolve hardening beyond anything he'd previously experienced throughout his considerable training. "I'm not gonna let you die here," Naruto said, his voice carrying newfound, fierce determination as chakra began surging through his form with an intensity that momentarily gave even Orochimaru pause. Drawing upon reserves he hadn't previously accessed even during his most intensive training sessions, Naruto's chakra chains suddenly multiplied and expanded with startling, overwhelming force. Dozens of golden restraints erupting simultaneously to ensnare not just Orochimaru directly, but the lingering spectral forms of the reincarnated Hokages as well, disrupting the delicate chakra balance, sustaining their unnatural presence upon the battlefield. Orochimaru's eyes widened with genuine, unmistakable surprise at this unprecedented display, forced to expend considerably more effort than anticipated extracting himself from the sudden, overwhelming assault of chains. Remarkable, he murmured, genuine astonishment coloring his tone as he finally broke free, retreating several paces to reassess this unexpected escalation. It seems your true potential remains considerably deeper than even I had initially estimated. The brief but critical opening created by Naruto's unprecedented display allowed Hiruzen precious moments to stabilize his own defensive position, the old Hokage drawing upon decades of hard-won experience and considerable remaining reserves of chakra to press a renewed, decisive counterattack against the momentarily destabilized reincarnated Hokages. The battle's ultimate resolution, when it finally arrived, proved considerably different from the tragic, singular sacrifice history had originally intended, with Naruto's timely, unprecedented intervention disrupting Orochimaru's careful battlefield calculations and providing Hiruzen crucial additional support against the reincarnated Hokages. The elderly leader found himself able to execute his final, decisive technique, the Forbidden Reaper Death Seal, with considerably greater strategic positioning than would have otherwise been possible. Orochimaru, Hiruzen said, his voice carrying grave, resolute finality as he prepared to unleash the technique's devastating power, your ambitions end here. Orochimaru's expression shifted rapidly from predatory confidence to genuine alarm as he recognized the technique's unmistakable, forbidden nature. Sarutobi-sensei, surely you don't intend, for Konoha's future, Hiruzen said simply, and for the boy who represents that future's brightest hope, I intend precisely that. The technique's activation proved every bit as devastating and consequential as its fearsome reputation suggested, the death's spectral form manifesting behind Hiruzen as he prepared to seal away both his own life force and, crucially, Orochimaru's arms, permanently crippling the Sanin's ability to perform hand seals, and thereby severely limiting his future capacity for combat and forbidden jutsu. Naruto watched in horrified, helpless understanding as the technique unfolded, recognizing with dawning, devastating clarity the magnitude of the sacrifice his mentor was making. No, wait! Naruto shouted, though he understood, even as the words left his mouth, that the technique's activation had already progressed beyond any possibility of halting. The Reaper Death Seal completed its terrible work, Orochimaru shrieking in genuine agony as his arms were rendered permanently useless, the Sannin forced into a hasty, humiliating retreat alongside his remaining sound forces as the invasion's broader momentum began collapsing amid Konoha's increasingly effective, coordinated defense. Hiruzen, his own life force having been partially, though not entirely, consumed by the technique's activation given Naruto's earlier intervention having allowed for a more strategically favorable execution than the original, unaided confrontation would have permitted, collapsed to his knees, visibly weakened but, against all odds, still breathing. Old man! Naruto rushed to his mentor's side, chakra chains dissolving as he knelt beside the exhausted, gravely weakened Hokage. Hiruzen managed a weak, genuine smile despite his evident, considerable exhaustion. It seems, your intervention allowed for a somewhat less absolute conclusion to that particular technique than I had originally anticipated. You're gonna be okay, Naruto said, though his voice carried the desperate hope of someone uncertain of that statement's actual accuracy. Just hold on, we'll get you to the hospital. Naruto, Hiruzen interrupted gently, though his voice grew increasingly faint despite his evident determination to continue speaking. Listen carefully. What you did here today, breaking that barrier, standing against Orochimaru, drawing upon reserves and resolve beyond even what your extensive training had prepared you for. You've demonstrated precisely the kind of strength and wisdom I always hoped you might grow into. I just did what I had to, Naruto said, tears beginning to form at the corners of his eyes despite his best efforts at composure. That, Hiruzen said, his weakened voice nonetheless carrying profound, genuine conviction, is precisely the mark of true strength, Naruto. Not power wielded for its own sake, or for conquest, as Orochimaru so desperately seeks, but strength employed in service of protecting those you care for, and the values you hold dear. Medical shinobi arrived moments later, rapidly assessing Hiruzen's condition and beginning immediate, intensive treatment for the severe chakra exhaustion and partial life force depletion resulting from his technique's activation. Though gravely weakened and requiring extensive recovery, the Third Hokage had, against considerable odds and thanks significantly to Naruto's unprecedented intervention, survived a confrontation that history had once claimed his life entirely. In the days that followed the invasion's ultimate repulsion, Konoha's shinobi forces, bolstered by reinforcements and Naruto's own considerable, now publicly acknowledged contributions, having successfully driven back the combined sound and sand assault with considerably less overall devastation than the invasion might have otherwise inflicted, the village slowly began the process of rebuilding and recovery. Hiruzen, though requiring weeks of careful medical treatment and rest to fully recover from his ordeal, survived the encounter that history had once claimed as his final battle, his continued presence providing crucial stability during Konoha's recovery period even as whispered accounts of Naruto's remarkable intervention spread rapidly throughout the village and beyond. Naruto found himself, in the aftermath, occupying a position considerably different from the outcast status that had defined much of his earlier childhood, where villagers had once regarded him with wary suspicion or outright disdain. Whispered accounts of his role in breaking Orochimaru's barrier, his direct confrontation against the legendary Sannin, and his crucial contribution toward Hiruzen's survival began circulating with a very different tenor, genuine, if cautious, respect and gratitude replacing years of unfounded fear and resentment. "You're something of a hero now, you know," Kakashi observed one afternoon, finding Naruto seated quietly atop the Hokage monument, gazing out over the village as it continued its recovery efforts following the invasion's considerable disruption. "Feels weird," Naruto admitted, echoing sentiments he'd expressed to Hiruzen weeks earlier regarding the public revelation of his true capabilities. "Everyone's looking at me different now. Not like before." "Change takes time," Kakashi said, settling beside his student with characteristic, understated warmth. "But I imagine your mother, wherever she is, would be considerably proud of the young man you've become." Naruto's expression softened at the mention of Kushina, a complicated mixture of pride and lingering, wistful longing for a mother he'd never had the chance to properly know. "I hope so." Torian, too, found himself experiencing a profound, deeply personal sense of vindication regarding the years he dedicated toward Naruto's careful, patient instruction. Visiting the boy shortly after the invasion's conclusion, the elderly sealing master regarded his student with evident, genuine pride. "You've honored Uzushiogakures' legacy admirably, Naruto," Torian said quietly, his weathered voice carrying deep, sincere emotion. "More than I believe even I fully anticipated when I first agreed to undertake your training all those years ago. Couldn't have done any of it without you teaching me everything," Naruto said, genuine gratitude evident in his tone. "You gave me more than just techniques, Torian-sensei. You gave me a connection to a part of myself I never even knew existed." Torian's weathered features carried a rare, unguarded warmth at these words. "Then perhaps, in some small measure, Uzushiogakures' spirit has indeed found its way back into this world after all, carried forward through you, its rightful heir." Yet even amid this hard-won period of recovery and cautious optimism, darker undercurrents continued stirring quietly beneath the surface, hinting at challenges still to come. Danzo Shimura, observing the invasion's aftermath and Naruto's now publicly confirmed, remarkable capabilities with characteristic, calculating patience, found his private interest in the boy's potential only deepening considerably, even as circumstances continued preventing any direct, overt action toward incorporating Naruto's abilities within his own root organization's broader ambitions. The boy's public reputation now makes direct approaches considerably more complicated, Danzo mused privately to himself, reviewing updated intelligence reports regarding Naruto's confirmed role in the invasion's ultimate resolution. But patience, as always, shall prove the more prudent course. Opportunities will present themselves in time. More distantly, within the shadowy organization known as Akatsuki, whispers of Naruto's remarkable publicly confirmed capabilities as both a Jinchuriki and inheritor of Uzushiogakures formidable clan techniques began reaching ears considerably less benevolent than those of Konoha's own leadership. The organization's shadowy leadership, already keenly interested in the various tailed beasts scattered throughout the shinobi world, found their attention increasingly dangerously drawn toward the young Uzumaki whose combined inheritance, both the Nine Tails' overwhelming power and his clan's own formidable, historically feared techniques, represented a target of considerable, escalating interest. The Nine Tails Jinchuriki, one shadowy figure murmured within a dimly lit, distant location, reviewing intelligence reports considerably similar to those Danzo himself had been quietly compiling for years. It seems Konoha's chosen vessel carries rather more significant potential than our organization's earlier assessments had originally anticipated. Uzushiogakure's bloodline, fully awakened within a single host, another voice replied, equally calculating in its measured consideration. Such a combination presents considerable challenges toward any future extraction efforts, but also, perhaps, considerable opportunity should circumstances eventually favor more direct engagement. Naruto, blissfully unaware of these distant, shadowy machinations continuing to develop around his growing reputation, found himself instead focused on the more immediate, personal satisfaction of watching Konoha slowly recover from the invasion's considerable disruption, and on his own continued growth and development under Torian's ongoing, patient guidance. Standing once more atop the Hokage monument as evening settled over the village, its rebuilding efforts continuing steadily amid the golden light of a peaceful sunset, Naruto found himself reflecting on the remarkable journey that had brought him to this particular moment. From a frightened, uncontrolled child summoning chains in a moment of fear and desperation, to a young shinobi who had, in a moment of genuine crisis, drawn upon his full, awakened inheritance to help save the life of the man who had guided and protected him throughout his formative years. This is only the beginning, isn't it? Naruto murmured quietly to himself, gazing out over the village that had once shunned him, but now, slowly and cautiously, began recognizing him for the remarkable, extraordinary individual he had grown into. Somewhere in the distance, storm clouds gathered faintly along the horizon, a subtle, symbolic reminder that despite this hard-won victory, considerably greater challenges, threats, and revelations still awaited Naruto Uzumaki on the path ahead. Orochimaru's ambitions, though significantly set back, remained far from fully extinguished. Akatsuki's shadowy interest continued growing steadily in the distance, and Danzo's own calculating patience ensured that the full complexity of political intrigue surrounding Naruto's remarkable inheritance remained far from fully resolved. But for now, in this singular, hard-earned moment of quiet reflection atop the monument bearing the faces of Konoha's past leaders, Naruto allowed himself simply to feel a profound, genuine sense of accomplishment and hope, the last living heir of a fallen nation, finally beginning to step into the full, remarkable legacy that had always been his birthright. The chains of Uzushiogakure, dormant for so many years, had fully awakened at last. And the world, whether ready or not, would soon come to understand exactly what that awakening truly meant. And that's a wrap on this story. From a scared 6-year-old boy accidentally summoning chains, to standing shoulder to shoulder with the Third Hokage against one of the most dangerous men in the shinobi world, Naruto's journey as the full heir of Uzushiogakure has been an absolute wild ride to tell. If you loved this story, smash that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and let me know in the comments which what-if premise you want to see next. Should we dive into Naruto mastering Sage Mode early? Naruto forming his own hidden village? Let me know below. Thank you all so much for watching this saga unfold. See you in the next story.